Good morning. This is the Citrus County Planning and Development Commission public hearing for May 4th, 2023. If you would like to join us at this time, I invite you to please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, please give us the grace to be understanding, patient, and tolerant. With these attributes, we can conduct our work in a manner which will be pleasing to Thee, our county, and its residents. In the Lord's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the courtesy of the applicants, the board, and those around you, please silence your devices at this time. May we have the roll call?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
The following Planning and Development Commission members are present this morning. Stacy Worthington, Chair. Richard Barnes, First Vice Chair. James Royce, Second Vice Chair. Robert Bass, David Bramblett, Michael Facemeyer, and Kurt Stone.
Thank you. If any person decides to appeal any decision made by the commission with respect to any matter considered at this hearing, he or she will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose, he or she may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. During the public input portions of the meeting, individuals are given 3 minutes and members of an organization are given 5 minutes. When anyone wishing to speak comes to the podium, please complete a yellow form and hand it to the recording secretary. Please print your name, address, and the number of the application for which you are speaking on the form. The yellow forms can be found by the podium at the podium by the door. If representing an organization, a letter of authorization must accompany the speaker or be on file. Comments will be limited to the topic being heard. Please state your name and give your address for the taped record. At this time, we will open to the public if you have any matters to discuss before the board other than those that are on the agenda today. Anyone? Okay, seeing none. We don't have any minutes to approve. Staff announcements?
So it's also noticed outside, the very first application on the agenda, CPA AA 2302, Mackenzie for Finley, has been postponed. That will be heard at a later date. That's all I have. Thank you.
Madam Attorney, do you have ex parte communication?
Yes, with regard to, I guess it's just going to be CPA AAPUD-23-03. Have you had any ex parte communications you need to disclose? And we'll start at the end with Commissioner Bass.
None.
Site visit.
Site visit?
None.
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 Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If the applicant is present for CPA-AA-PUD-23-03, please come to the podium and may we have the introduction, please.
CPA AA PUD 2303 Wilburn for Veer. This application proposes to amend the future land use map of and LDC Atlas map for a new RV park. This site is 45.6 acres in size and lies on the west side of US 19 in Homosassa. The site is currently designated as GNC, LDR, and CL, and would change to RVP for 98 RV sites. This is the adjacent Bellevilla Mobile Home Park to the north, which has 2 access points onto US 19. The proposed RV park entrance, shown on the lower right in this photo, would share the existing access easement to US 19 with Bellevilla Mobile Home Park. This is part of the interior of the site as viewed from the access easement. This is the master plan proposed by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Wilburn.
Good morning. Michael Wilburn, P.O. Box 938, Floral City, Florida. I'm here today to represent this, I believe it's the first PUD of 2023, based on the number. But as mentioned, this is currently zoned coastal lakes, And we're requesting that this be rezoned to RVP. As you can see, this is a very small portion of the entire 46 some acre site, and that is due to a large portion of the site being wetland. The state of Florida at some point in this site's history also dug a canal, which you see on this site plan running east to west almost through the center of the property. It ties into another canal on the west side of the property, which ties into our Gulf. So this is a request for up to 98 units, including a bathhouse and a clubhouse. Recently, there have been many projects that have requested a deviation from your bathhouse requirement, and that deviation has been granted. In this case, the clients requested to put a bathhouse on site. So one of the staff comments is a deviation requesting the bathhouse to be 300 feet away or more than 300 feet away from any RV spot. However, there have been many parks because of new RVs and having their own facilities and things like that that have been approved by this board and the county commission without having a bathhouse at all. It also has a clubhouse. Both of these are centrally located in the center of that site plan. There are utilities available at US 19 currently. You saw one of the pictures, maybe two of the pictures. There's a mobile home park adjacent to this. It is owned by the same owners. In your staff report makes mention of this. That mobile home park currently has a treatment plant that is located on this property. And so as a part of this permit and as part of this plan unit development, we're requesting that wastewater treatment plant that is currently serving the mobile home park on this property be removed, and both the mobile home park and this project be tied into city sewer. Both projects, or this project as well as the mobile home park, are serviced by city water, so that's not an issue either. There are amenities on site. They're mentioned in your staff report. Not only do we have a clubhouse, but there are walking trails. We have also had 2 meetings, Zoom meetings with the Southwest Florida Water Management District to discuss ways and possibilities of having walking trails and nature trails through areas of the wetland. And they have been amenable to that, excited about that even, to use nature as a part of the amenity. And so that's mentioned in the staff report as well, that there will be walking trails throughout. But there, like I said, there is a canal that you see here running east to west, but on the west side, that canal gets larger. And so one of the amenities may be in the future to have the ability for people to walk through, maybe even launch a paddleboard or a kayak, and have that benefit also. Not only is that a benefit, but I forgot to mention, when this project removes the wastewater treatment plant from the mobile home park, that'll be a net benefit to not only the mobile home park, but the surrounding areas as well. The sites. So normally there are sites in our land development code are 30 by 50, 1,500 square feet, as you'll notice on this particular parcel. And I'm not sure in your packet what size you can see and how clear you can see it. I know we had some issues with this one because it's almost 50 acres. But there are 3 different types of RV spots that are before you. The majority of these spots are 30 by 50. Some of them are straight in, some of them are angled. There are 77 of those spots that are regular 30 by 50. There are 7 sites that are 40 by 45. And again, this is in the staff report, but they meet the 1,500 square foot minimum. And then there are 14, which may show up in your packet as being pink. Those 14 spaces are irregular in size, but they are all over 1,500 square feet. And again, we have some site parameters and restrictions that we're trying to work around. You'll notice on the site plan, there are 2 lines that are kind of squiggly on the west, and one of them comes up from the south. Those are JD lines, jurisdictional wetland lines, that separate the wetland from the upland. And then the second line that is inside the property from that is our 25-foot setback. And so we've tried to space this, tried to design this to account for that wetland. We have met with, like I said, Southwest Florida Water Management District about mitigating. And we're trying to do this project without having to mitigate, even though they said it was an option. And so that's how you see the layout. That's why you see the irregular shaped ponds, because we're working with the site constraints of the wetlands that are adjacent and surrounding. This project would be required to retain the 25-year storm event per Southwest Florida Water Management District regulations. It's an open basin, as I mentioned. It goes right out to the Gulf, and so we would be required to attenuate according to the rules also and retain that storm event with water quality. Landscaping. In your staff report, you can see that we have requested a couple deviations with the depth of those buffers. While we do have a very large buffer on the north and the west because of the existing wetland and protecting that, and a portion of the south, there are areas where that buffer, as shown, is restricted. And I'm not sure how to appropriately say this, but in the staff report, the findings of fact, there are some conditions. The conditions that are mentioned for the landscaping, we would have no issue with. And I believe it's just changing from a type A to a 10-foot type C in those areas of question. And so the applicant has no issue with complying with that condition and would be happy to do so. And in regards to the staff conditions, all of the other conditions that are mentioned are acceptable and also pleasing to the applicant. You guys have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Joanne.
My turn, all right. Just clarification, I think in your presentation you said it was city, sewer, and water, but I think this is county?
I'm sorry,
correct?
yeah.
Okay, no problem,
Sorry.
just clarification on that.
Thank you.
And you said that the 10-foot type A that you're proposing, you're okay with the 10-foot type C that is in the conditions of approval?
ma'am.
That would be on the north and east abutting the mobile home park, and then to the south abutting the residential?
Yes.
All right, and there was an engineering condition of a 20-foot wide paved improvement from the entry to 19, and no concern about that as well?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to. That I believe that's stated as a minimum. We would want that to be 24 foot to match what we have on site. So yes, not a problem.
Thank you. No other questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question.
Commissioner Bramlett?
Can you tell me the furthest distance site from the bathhouse? You say it's going to be a little over 300 feet.
Yes, I can get very, very close. About 780 feet
That's how far it'll be?
from the furthest point.
And it's supposed to be 300 feet? No more than 300 feet?
Yes, sir.
Here in my presentation.
I'm in yours.
Yeah, that's
All
all
right.
right. It means that one.
Which guy do I do to magnify here?
It's the top.
It just vibe. There we
There
go.
you go.
So I'm guessing that this one is the furthest away,
Okay.
and so it's about 16 of those 50-foot spots.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bass?
Just want to clarify something. As you come in off of the easement, you have a 24-foot wide drive, correct?
Internal is 24 foot. Yes.
All the way around the entire parcel?
Yes.
All right, because part of it was cut off on the left side, so I couldn't quite tell if it was 20 or 24. You indicate that the parking stalls are going to be as deep as 50 feet. Now, if you take a look at a fifth wheel, the longest length of a camper itself is 45 feet, and if you add a truck onto it, it's 60 feet. How do you plan on having them fit in these stalls that you're proposing when it's 60, but your parking depth is only 50?
Right. So in our land development code, it requires the minimum to be a 30 by 50 spot, and there's a lot of RV parks that have that. So the shorter stalls, normally they mitigate that by, you pull in, you can disembark your camper and then pull next to it. Or many of these spots, especially the irregular ones in parallel parking, the plan is to designate them as actual RV units and not fifth wheel or bumper pull. So there's some site restrictions, yes, based on the size, but as you look at it, you can, the idea and the plan behind this phasing would be to implement certain campers, certain sizes in certain locations.
Okay. And you did agree to a 24-foot aisle coming in off of
Yes.
19?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
On this site plan, there was something brought up by staff about active recreation. Where on this site plan would that be?
So for active recreation, you'll have, there's no architectural renderings of this, but you'll have an outdoor area outside the clubhouse, as well as ping pong pool in the clubhouse. And then, like I said, active, we also have plans, and the state has been generous to allow plans to have a walking trail through the wetlands that loops and meanders. And also part of that active recreation will be the ability to launch kayaks or paddle boards, as well as walking trail. The roadway is wider than it needs to be, as shown, and so there. And I think the staff report makes mention of this, that you can have walking trails around the ponds, as well as walking trails around the roadway, or a walking trail, pedestrian access around the roadway.
Okay. The RV park, the people staying there will be temporary and transient.
That's correct.
There's no office.
No, there's
So
not.
is there some sort of plan to use the adjoining property next door? Because that office is very small too.
No, the desire of the owner is to keep those two completely separate. And I believe we've made that clear in discussions with staff. The trend is moving towards, especially on a smaller scale like this, not to have an office. And I'm almost positive, I could be wrong, but I think there's something in there about checking in online, checking out online, things like that.
There is.
Okay, but there's no plan to have an office. If there was an office, maybe a small portion of the clubhouse would be designated for that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Michael. Now we'll have the staff presentation.
I'm so much shorter than him, my goodness. All right, this is an application to change approximately 45.6 acres from a mix of CL, LDR, and GNC and going to an RV park. So this is the site on the aerial. Quite a bit of this is not going to be developed. You can see the reference he's made here to the water treatment plant. That's this area right here. It's a huge mound. I do have a picture of it later. That will disappear as part of this application, and this site, as well as the adjacent mobile home park, would connect to central water and sewer. Those are certainly good things. All right, here's the zoning change. You can see general commercial in the front, it's LDR in the middle, and CL in the west. We were talking about buffers, and the reason is you can see on this particular map those residential lots to the south, and then of course the mobile home park where they're abutting right here. So the applicant has agreed to turn that into a type C. It is a reduced width 10-foot type C, but it would have the plantings of a C rather than an A buffer. This is part of the site. Yes, they jumped the gun a little bit on tree removal. I did notify the applicant of that when we saw this, and I think he has advised the applicant to stop doing that. So I don't see any new evidence of this. It doesn't look like they went quite into the wetlands, just removed trees a little fast. This is the site plan. I'm going to go over it a little bit in a zoom detail in a second. There we go. So this zooms into what we're talking about. He referred to it as pink. I don't really show the pink too much. Here's the irregular shaped ones along the wetland here. We've got some 40 by 45 and some 30 by 50 and some ponds. So this area right here is where that mound is right now, and it would be used instead for RVs. They're going to have to do a little bit of grading work on that one. So this is the adjacent Belleville Mobile Home Park. There is this separation area that's not part of this application. It's also not used for the mobile home park itself. It's just kind of an open area. And this is the right-of-way coming in, the easement coming in that would be widened to, as you heard Dr. Wilburn say, 24 feet. Yeah, this is in pretty bad shape. He's going to have to do a little bit of work on this one. The commercial up on 19, you can see it's actually cordoned off, not used. That building's not used at this time, but it is a separate general commercial parcel. They could use it. This is exactly the area where the entryway would be here on the right side of this picture. And this is part of the Belleville Mobile Home Park. Looking at it, this is the same access easement. You can see the Belleville Mobile Home Park on the left, and on the right side is the application site. So they are very much adjacent to that. That's why staff was pushing for a type C buffer rather than a type A, although this easement does separate them. And this is the area that we're concerned about with the buffer, and that's the existing park up there. So he has agreed to a 10-foot type C. That's certainly going to help. This is part of the mobile home park, and the reason I took this picture, besides the pipe that I showed to environmental health, and they're like, yeah, so it's apparently fine. But you see the mound back there? That's what they have to remove. It is a huge mounded site back there for the septic. Having that removed and putting it on central sewer, great thing. So here's the site plan again. Staff had concerns about buffers. He has corrected that. You do see the wetlands to the west. They are proposing as close as a 700-foot setback to that wetland area, to the marsh off-site. So we definitely are not impacting the conservation area to the west. They do not seem to be impacting any wetlands either. They are maintaining a wetland buffer. So there are multiple conditions here which the applicant has agreed to.
Thank you. Any questions from the applicant? Questions from the board?
I have a question.
Commissioner Bramlett?
Mr. Stone?
Commissioner Stone?
Is that wetland over there, is that part of the St. Martin's marsh?
It appears to be, yes. Off-site, yes.
Okay. And the other thing, how does this request fit in with Section 5 of the Land Development Code, which states that all CL district lands? I said, how does this fit in with Section 5 of the Land Development Code, in particular, that it says on Section 2401, says all CL district lands, the predominant land use shall be single-family residential development with a maximum density of 1 dwelling per 20 acres, unless, of course, you have a PUD. But then for a PUD, it says that the minimum should be 160 acres required for a development plan, which this does not appear to meet. And gross density shall not exceed 1 dwelling per 5 acres. This also seems to not meet that. And it also states that a 1,000-foot buffer shall be provided around all lands designated as part of the St. Martin's Marsh Aquatic Preserve. And while the 700 feet is admirable, it doesn't meet the letter of the development code.
Okay, that is a misinterpretation from that particular site, but I'll go over as to why, and I'm actually going to touch that on my ordinance amendment next application. But what you're seeing in CL is a quote from the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan says, in CL, you have to have 1 unit per 20 acres, unless you want to do higher. And the option for a higher density says, we'll do this higher density, and there's all these minimum sizes. You quoted that. There is a setback from the St. Martin's area. All that if you want to do that higher density development as a PUD in CL. That's not happening here. They're not trying to do residential in CL. Yes, if they were trying to develop CL right here as residential and they wanted to use that extra density thing, we'd be looking at the setback to the marsh. We're not here. That does not apply because they're not trying to do that additional density in CL. But it is CL right now. I don't see how it could ever develop as CL because it looks like it's almost entirely, if not entirely, wetlands in that area. This would change it to RV park devoted as wetland open space. So we'll kind of protect it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bramlett?
Can you speak to the applicant's discussion about the approval of previous RV parks and the distance and the deviation with the bathroom? Because I feel like the last one that we did, they tried to do the deviation and we didn't allow it.
That's true. We did have a recent one where we did not. It's unusual. Looking back over the past 5 to 10 years, we usually have, as a board, the commission usually has. That's an old thing from, frankly, our old 90s code, and it was carried forward in 2012. RVs are different now, so we can consider in a future amendment, not today's amendment, it's too late, but possibly looking at that and maybe adjusting that based on modern RV standards. Understand the code says what it is. I think that one is a little bit outdated for current RVs.
I remember it though. It was the one in Lecanto way out there in by the forest. And
right.
I feel like in that particular instance, we said no deviation on that one.
You did,
We
you
made that,
did.
we made it a condition.
Right, that was the very first one in a while that we've done that, but if you
Right.
feel it's warranted here, I think it's.
Why did we feel it wasn't warranted there? Why is this one different than that one?
In staff's opinion, it's not reflecting current RVs.
What was the staff's opinion of that particular one?
Same thing, we did not
And-
support that.
And that was this board's decision to
Correct.
say that we thought it should be.
Correct.
Mr. Bramlett, I think the question was whether to have a bathhouse at all or to require them to meet the standard.
On the previous one,
Yes.
I know, I know that whatever he wanted to do, we said no, we wanted the bathhouse.
He wanted to develop it without a bathhouse. And
Do you
we
remember
said-
what the deviation was for how far away?
That I do not remember.
Right.
I think we said just follow the standard.
In that particular one, you actually told that applicant to put a second bathhouse in. He had one that met it, and
Right.
he had to put a second one as a condition.
Right, so I sort of feel like how do we do one for one and something else for somebody else?
Okay, you can apply here, that's slightly different in that this is in a flood zone, so he is gonna have to deal with base flood elevation. That's just a complication for the applicant. It's up to this board.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Yes.
Commissioner Bass?
I'd just like to go back to something that Commissioner Stone stated, and that was the 1,000-foot buffer shall be provided around all lands designated as part of St. Martin's Marsh Aquatic Preserve. I know that was talking to CL, which is what this currently is, and we're trying to change it to GC. Why can't we keep that 1,000 feet for this particular
The
development?
1,000 foot is, right, it's not applicable, and I know there's a conspiracy, I've heard this so many times since the Glamground application. The 1,000 foot buffer is if an applicant wants to increase density in CL to have that additional density that's allowed. Instead of 1 to 20, they can do more if they do a PUD and they maintain that buffer. That's what that is. If you can't read it in a vacuum, it doesn't mean all CL PUDs have to be 1,000 feet from the marsh. What it says is if I want that extra density, I have to be 1,000 feet from the marsh, as well as other criteria. I think if we did 1,000 feet here, that wipes out this site, and we don't want to do a full taking on that. But it's not applicable anyway. They're not asking for increased density in CL. If they were, absolutely, that would apply.
All right, thank you.
Joanna, is there okay, so they have the Belle Villa RV and what looks like some sort of motel thing. And then is there going to be cross access between these two sites?
There is, yes. And I actually had a picture of it in my slides. You can access right here and go all the way up. I actually drove this. So this really isn't quite there, but they have this that connects to the existing mobile home park. So there is a cross access. You can use this particular item. They don't have to be right on 19. You can place them where it's convenient. It's actually already there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Where the
Commissioner Morris.
slide that showed the cars parked on the left side facing towards the left, was that next to that, there? Is that next to that green buffer on the side, on the bottom?
No, this is actually, it's right here.
Okay.
I'm standing here and looking.
All right, thank you.
Joanna, the CL is basically not buildable, right? I mean,
It doesn't appear to be. Based on his map, it looks like it's all wetlands. Yeah.
I have a question for the applicant now. Why they didn't just do the LDR? They needed part of that for this site plan?
I don't think so, but you can ask the applicant why they included that area in and didn't just leave it to CL. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. The public portion of the meeting will now be opened. If there is anyone present in favor of the application who would like to speak, please come forward to the podium. As a reminder, individuals have 3 minutes to speak and organizations have 5 minutes. When speaking on this application, please address the board. If you have any documentation that you want to be entered into the record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary. Anyone in favor, please come forward. Going once, twice, seeing none. Anyone opposed to this application, please come to the podium.
Good morning, PJ Offhammer. This was not even in my wheelhouse, and I'm just a little riled up. So, I have some questions. And because I didn't really look into this prior, I hope you will bear with me. But when the applicant went through real quick, I would like to know the percentage of the open space, how it was calculated. The thing about the parking with the RVs, this is a standard problem with all of the RV parks that I keep seeing coming through here. You have the slot for the RV to park, and he's saying, well, if they're bigger, that they can park on the side. Is there going to be a concrete pad for that parking, or are we just going to have vehicles leaking into the area, which will then drain into the wetlands? We're talking about, what was it, a 780-foot deviation for a bathhouse. You know, yeah, RVs have bathrooms in them. They're not really lovely. If you have a choice, you'll use a bathhouse. And if you have guests, where are you going to park your guests? Do they have overflow parking for that, where it's secured, where their leaking vehicles aren't going to leak and drain into the wetlands? And the bathhouse, you know, when you have your guests and your little RV bathroom is full of somebody who's doing whatever in it, and everybody else that's there at a party with you has to go to the bathroom, they're not going to walk 780 feet. I'm a camper. I know what happens in these areas. And to be frank, they're pissing on the ground, and they're doing other things. I don't think you need to be deviating for this. I think it sets up a bad precedent. I believe I had issues with your septic tank with the RV park that was down on 491. I don't think that should have been okay either. I don't think it's acceptable that you say this is not our problem to look at. You need to be looking at all of the repercussions that you are causing by your votes to other departments, to other agencies, and the citizens of Citrus County. They don't have any right to come in here and ask to be changed from CL. They knew what it was when they bought it. You don't have to change it. You need to look at what it's going to do to everybody in this county. And I would hope that you would pay attention to that. It's not a taking. They have the parcel. They can choose to come to you with some other plan. You do not have to accept this just because they want to have it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed to the application, please come to the podium.
Good morning, council members. I didn't come here specifically for this application, but sitting in the audience and listening to this, it kind of goes
I'm
along
sorry,
with
could you
your,
state your name
oh,
for the
Karen
record?
Esty. It goes along with your comp plan amendments that you'll be hearing later on. When you consider putting PUDs in CL, you increase density, and they say you're not increasing density, but you really are. As the last speaker said, you have people coming in with travel trailers and cars and PUDs, and once you start setting a precedence with PUDs and coastal lakes, it just makes it a matter of right, and it's almost impossible to say, we can't deny this because a precedence has already been set. In addition to that, the state and the counties have spent millions and millions of dollars to restore our wetlands and our lakes and our rivers. But here we are allowing this particular applicant to come in and degrade this area, saying they're going to mitigate wetlands. We've done that all up and down the coast. We've done it here in the county. And it's time that we have to stop and respect that these are public lands. These are just not ownership of lands. They act like we can just come in and just do what we want because it's a conditional use. We have to think of the health and well-being of everything else around it that belongs to the public. So I'm asking you not to not approve this. This is not a hardship for him. He knew going in what he had, so he can develop this property as it is, or some other use that's not intrusive into the wetlands that will degrade and diminish our wetlands and our streams. So I'm asking you, please, to deny this or reconsider how this is reconfigured. It's just not appropriate for a wetland area. And there's nothing to say that he can't go forward with more. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed to the application, please come forward. And please, you can come forward. You don't have to wait for me to call on you or anything.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Robin Orlandi, 11420 Linda Marie Terrace in Dunellen. I hadn't planned to speak either, but on hearing that we're considering developing another wetland, I just felt it was essential to get up, say something. I know this weekend the Coastal Resilience Planning Conference is taking place down in Tampa to try to ensure that our coastal wetlands and our nature coast, the zones of aquatic protection that go from Tampa all the way up past Steinhatchee, are prepared for future sea level rise and flooding scenarios. And there is statute peril of flood that we're supposed to be planning for, saying if it's in a flooded area, don't allow more development there. Encourage people not to put businesses that are going to get flooded in these areas, move them back where they're safe. And there's also a 2020 citrus document for coastal planning that was done with the Resilience Department that I'm wondering if any of these developments and changes to the code are taking that into account. Because from what I've seen and am seeing, I went out to Ozella to go kayaking, and it was flooded just last weekend. I mean, there was water over the road. And so this is another wetland area. These buffers are very important to protect land inland in future scenarios. We're not talking 30 years, we're talking 10 now if you look at the science. So I would ask you, you've got a really hard job, because what you do now is going to be what happens in 10, 20, 30 years. And those generations are going to wonder why we did or didn't take action. So I would ask you all to please consider that. It's not just about this development, it's about the future of the nature coast and the future for our children in this area. We're growing so fast, I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. So I don't, I wouldn't want to be in your seat, but I hope that you'll make the correct decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed to the application? Anyone else? Going once, twice, seeing none. Okay, we'll hear from the applicant. Do you have a response?
I'd just like to say a few things. The first one is about the wetlands and the open space. I want to kind of, maybe if I can use Ms. Katu's slide here. The mobile home park to the northeast of this site, basically that white square, most of that property does not drain to US 19. It drains to this site and then to the wetland. And so in hearing some of the concerns from the speakers who just spoke, there seems to be a lot of concern about the environment, the wetlands. And so I want to remind you of a few things. This application is not proposing that we mitigate any existing wetlands. In fact, as the staff report mentions, we are keeping an established buffer, maintaining that established buffer, not even intruding into that established buffer. And then you'll notice on this plan, as you see it, we're even off of that buffer as well. So I made mention of the existing mobile home park draining to this site because as part of this permit packet, as part of this design, SwiftMud is going to require that we treat that water because it's currently coming to us. And so I've mentioned before, as well as Ms. Katu, that this is a net benefit to the surroundings, not only because we're taking away that treatment plant and wiping off that impact environmentally completely, which is a huge benefit to this area. The second benefit is we have to treat that water that is currently running straight into the wetland now. So again, that's a second net benefit. That water currently going straight to the wetland is now going to be, as a part of this development, retained, treated, and then some of it discharged post-treatment. And that treatment process is scrutinized by engineers and staff at SwiftMud. You have to attenuate a certain amount. You have to prove that you're not reloading nutrients and other things into that system before it is discharged. And so there's a high level of scrutiny that will go in a part of this design. So we're not impacting the wetlands. In my opinion, we're actually making it better because we're reducing the amount of offsite runoff that goes to it now before it's treated. And then secondly, we're having a major net benefit just because we're removing that water treatment, the wastewater treatment plant. And again, somebody mentioned about flooding. As a part of that same process, not only will we have to show that we're retaining that water, that we're treating that water, we'll also have to show and prove and document that we're not increasing the floodplain off-site as well as on-site. And so that'll all be part of SwiftMud's requirements. So we're not increasing the floodplain anywhere. We're not placing fill that's unaccounted for. All that is a part of that process and that approval. And most of the time, those projects end up being a net benefit to the floodplain analysis also. And those are permanently documented with SwiftMud, so the next guy who develops or so on and so forth, they take that into account as well. So again, we're not asking for any mitigation. We're not trying to mitigate anything. And I believe this project is a net benefit to the environment. And not only that, but staying away from that wetland that we have on site and preserving that natural buffer. Thank you.
Dr. Wilburn,
Yes,
why
ma'am.
did you include the CL?
Okay, thank you. I have that written down, but didn't know if it would come up. So I just used the property appraiser measuring tool with that CL buffer versus the LDR. And as best I can estimate, and I'm pretty sure I remember this, if you look at where the bathhouse is now and the clubhouse, the CL starts 165 feet off of this property line. So right about right here is where that line splits between the CL and the LDR. CL being over here and LDR being here, and then the GNC portion being right here. And so that's why we were asking for that change, because of this loop right here, because it almost splits where this is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask and
Yeah,
mention two
absolutely.
things real quick while we have his attention? Mr. Bass brought up something earlier about the drive, 24-foot wide drive all the way around. Is that correct? Because your plan shows a 20-foot wide drive on the backside on this full-size split right here. I don't know what's proper or what's correct. I just want to make sure we have it clear.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but
It says 20-foot wide drive, two-way.
it's probably a typo. 24 is required.
So it's 24 all the way.
Yeah,
Just
and-
all
and-
that black we see is 24.
Yeah, and if you look at it all the same, so yes, it needs to be 24. Would be 24.
Okay. All right. And I just have another question just because I'm curious. Like that entire area where the bathhouse is and all that loop is going, that currently is the mounded septic drain field.
So the mound is actually probably where this road is and the two on each side. I don't think it extends this far over.
Okay. I'm just curious, like when they wipe that away, like waste has been draining there for a really long time. Like what kind of circumstances do they do? Or what do they do to clear that off? Like you're going to put like residential people walking around where waste has been draining, and that Belleville has been there for as long as I've been here.
Right. So I'm not an environmental engineer, which you would need for that, but a part of that design, a part of that approval, because you'd have to get approval to demo it, would be a remediation and restoration process. It probably would require digging down maybe within 6 to 8 inches of the aquifer lining and re-putting clean fill in, things like that. I would imagine, but yes, you're right.
So there is a remediation process
There
then.
is, and it's all part of the approval that you would request.
Right. So like all those years and years and years of waste draining in is actually going to be cleaned up and
Yes.
fresh, clean fill.
You think it stays there?
I had no idea. That's why I asked. I mean, I don't like they're just going to scrape off 6 inches off the top and pave over it. I don't know. I mean, that's
So
why I asked.
the picture you couldn't really see it on the picture, but there's about 4 foot of
I saw
mound.
it. Yeah, I know. Like, so
So
when you
it'll
dig
all
down
come
on
out.
that,
But you know, this is not an industrial site, and they're not pumping mercury into the ground.
it's still human
It's
waste.
fecal chloroform, and when it's exposed to sunlight for 12 hours, it's totally harmless. Okay,
still
so
not
they may
touching
have
it.
had decades or...
It may be harmless, but it doesn't sound fun.
Well, it doesn't
People are going to
even-
be walking barefooted
It
around
doesn't
there.
even smell bad. You walk across cow pastures that are much...
At this time, we're going to close the public
It was
portion
just a
of the
question.
meeting and bring the discussion back to the board. You gentlemen want to continue? Who's first? Anybody?
I have a comment. Yeah. You know, I don't see any reason to change the coastal lakes designation for an RV park. Okay, coastal and lakes designation is our highest, most valuable designation for property in this county. Okay, and an encroachment even minor is intolerable. Okay, so I will not be supporting this.
Commissioner Bramlett?
I would just say that I would be willing to trade the small encroachment on the CL with no wetland impact or mitigation happening for the trade-off of what we just discussed and the however many mobile homes that are sitting on a septic system and draining into who knows what. So I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, hang on, with no deviation for the bathroom. I want to hear what the rest of you, but in my opinion, we didn't give the last guy a deviation for the bathroom, and until the code is changed, then I don't see that we'd give this person a deviation.
I have a question.
Commissioner Bass?
I have a question for our planner. Excuse me. Did you indicate that, or did you state, if I got it correctly, that you think that they cleared in the wetlands already?
I don't have the wetlands flagged out there. It does not appear, it looks like they went up close, but I don't think they actually did, from what I could tell.
Okay, thank you. And I'm very torn on this. I see value, but I also see Commissioner Stone's point too, that, why do we have to change this? And as one of the residents said, they bought it, they know what they got when they got the piece of property. So I'm really torn as to which way to go. I'd like to hear what other commissioners have to say. And in regards to Commissioner Bramlett and the bathhouse, he brings up a very valid point in requiring the second bathhouse to meet the 300 feet. So I would agree with Dave that having the second bathhouse is not a bad idea.
I think I'm gonna just give my 2 cents here now, since it seems like I didn't support the adding the bathhouse on that other application either, because modern camping, I know that we had a member in the audience who said that people will prefer to use a bathhouse. I have camped. I've never, ever, ever gone in a bathhouse, ever. I will use my private camping bathroom that I have in my motorhome. So I will just say that. And so there is not, I don't see the need for the second bathhouse. And as far as the CL is not buildable. It is going to be completely protected. It's covered with wetlands. It's a minor encroachment. And I really agree with Commissioner Bramlett that taking that septic system and converting people back to the sewer is much more net positive benefit than this small minor encroachment into the CL. So I'm in favor of the application, and I don't support the second bathhouse. Commissioner Fakesmeyer.
Madam Chair.
Well, this application is not perfect, and in an ideal world, we would have everything meet the code. I agree with those who also recognize the net benefit of taking a package treatment plant offline and also treating stormwater runoff that's not happening now. Would it be better if we got rid of the package plant and treated the stormwater runoff without an RV park? Absolutely. But I think this is a fair trade-off, and quite frankly, I don't care where the bathhouse goes.
May I say one more thing before I get to you, Ms. Lynn?
You're the chairwoman.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say also that, okay, we leave the LDR the way it is. That's 30 single-family homes. You just said, okay, well, we take it away, but okay, does that make sense here? 30 single-family homes behind that plaza? Next to a mobile home park?
I'm supporting this.
Yeah, I know, but maybe for some others. Ms. Lynn?
I would just remind you all that you're to make your decisions based upon the evidence and testimony that's been provided before you and what the law is, which, when we're talking about the bathhouses. And while you all come to this board with personal experiences and, things, you're not supposed to take anything of your personal life into consideration, just the testimony and evidence that's presented before you.
So, thank you very much. Anyone else would like to say something, or I'm looking for a motion?
I would just say that that's kind of weird that we're not supposed to bring our personal experiences into the decision-making process, because I know that this board is comprised of And I'm not accosting you, this is just discussion, right? Because you
Accosting?
brought it up.
I hope you're not accosting me.
It's different experiences, engineers, HOA presidents, realtors, you know, down the line. And that's why we have that type of spectrum of people on here. And to say that we're not supposed to bring our personal experiences in here, but I think that's why we're supposed to be here, or else we would just have like a board of all the same people,
You're acting as a jury.
right? A jury of peers.
Well, it's not a jury of peers. You're a jury. A professional engineer or a professional surveyor would use their professional opinions as they sit here. Or realtor is going to use your professional real estate, not your personal experiences in life, your professional ones. So that's why you're made up of professionals. But you just be, I mean, the example is, we had a judge one time who went home and did experiments on his own with, I can't remember the facts, but it was something about baking soda and water or something. And the court said, you don't get to go home and make your own experiments when you only get to make your decisions based upon the evidence and testimony that's presented to you. So I remember we had a PDC member who at one time she operated an RV park herself. And so she was trying to explain to an applicant how it wasn't a big deal to run a package plant. You can't, that was so inappropriate for that board member to tell the applicant, oh, it's a package plant. I've got one of my own. I can tell you how to do it. I'll meet you afterwards. No, you can't do stuff like that. You can just base it on the evidence and testimony. So
Thank you for the clarification.
you're welcome.
When they get to the non-quasi judicial part, though, for the other application, they can, though, right?
Yes, that is non-quasi judicial. Absolutely. They're making law. There's a difference between applying the law that already exists and making law. So the next application, you're making law or changing law. But this one, you're applying the law as it exists to the facts as they're presented to you.
Would anyone else like to say something?
Madam Commissioner, for the purpose of a motion,
Thank you. Commissioner Barnes.
just want to clarify one thing on the conditions prior. We are going to write in 24 foot instead of 20, correct?
Yeah, that was offered by the applicant verbally, so yeah, I think condition 7 can change to construct a 24-foot wide access as offered by the applicant.
All right, the Planning and Development Commission finds application number CPA-AA-PUD-23-03 consistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and Citrus County Land Development Code, and that this board recommends approval with the conditions as stated of the application to the Board of County Commissioners based upon the evidence and testimony presented and the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition.
Thank you. We have a first by Commissioner Barnes.
I have a question about that. Are we doing the deviation for the bathhouse included in there?
Well, do we want to get a consensus? I'm fine with the deviation.
I don't think we need a bathroom addition.
What do the conditions say now? That they allow it? The deviation is allowed?
Condition
The master
3
plan
says,
is-
condition 3 says that some sites may not meet that regarding minimum distance as outlined in the master plan.
Right, okay. I remember reading that now.
So I have 3 saying they're fine with the conditions as written.
I'm not fine with that only because I'm not going to change based on my previous vote for the last RV park. Everything else I'm fine with.
Okay. Would anyone else, a 4th, like to weigh in on this so we could have some sort of consensus or no?
So, Dave, you're saying that you want the additional bathhouse then?
I do. Only on precedent because of the last particular application that we dealt with.
So
I just don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable coming up here voting for it for one park and then the next guy
How
comes
do you know
up.
you voted for it? I mean, Madam Attorney, also, aren't we supposed to decide each application separately?
You're supposed to decide each application based on the law.
Yeah.
And the law says that there's supposed to be one within 300 feet.
And we might not like that law, and we might want to change that law, but that's the law. And you are supposed to make a determination based upon only the application that's before you.
So-
Okay, we have a motion and we have
You don't have a
I
second
need-
yet?
okay, we have a second by Commissioner Royce. Any further discussion?
So are we gonna modify condition 3 then, that states that a second bathroom facility
We
is
have
required?
3 people who say no. I don't have a fourth, so unless someone, we have 1 opposed. That's all I've heard. To the conditions as written, to the motion that's on the floor.
I support Dave that we should have
Okay,
the,
so that's 3-2. Gentlemen?
Well, he's against the
He's
application
against the whole
completely.
thing.
Oh, okay.
Don't look at me.
He's
I don't
against
look
the
at
whole
me.
thing.
Okay, it's on you, Commissioner Facemeyer.
I think he already said he wasn't against, opposed to the bathroom deviations.
I'm not opposed to it either way.
Okay, so then we have a first by Commissioner Barnes, a second by Commissioner Royce with the conditions as written. And we'll call for a vote then. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4-3? Motion carries 4-3.
Maybe you should do a hand vote.
Roll call, please.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass,
nay.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Worthington,
Yes.
Commissioner Royce,
Yes.
Commissioner Bramblett,
Nay.
Commissioner Facemeyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Stone.
Nay.
4-3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will hear AO-23-01, an ordinance amendment. Welcome, Joanna.
And as pointed out, this one is not a quasi-judicial, so we can talk and talk and talk. That's fine. So there's a lot of changes in this application. Why is this coming before you now? There is some stuff in the some citizens think there's some kind of ulterior motive here. There's not. This is part of the commissioner's outstanding items. One of the items in here is waterfront setbacks for in-ground pools. So because of that, the staff takes a list of all the things that are coming up that may or may not be misinterpreted or should be clarified, and that's what this does. So I'm going to go over some of them. I'm not going to go over page by page, but we can certainly pull one out if you want to talk about it more. So one of the main things this does is clarify official interpretations. Right now it says that my office does all of the official interpretations of the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan. Clearly, I have no authority in stormwater or utility placement, that kind of thing. Those are done by those directors. So although it's somewhat worded that way, we did want to put this in here to say, yes, that obviously if it's stormwater, it's the Public Works Director or the county engineer, water connections or water resources, etc. So that's to clarify. Don't look at me for stormwater and engineering concerns. And we are adding back in an eve encroachment. This board did approve and debated how we should look at eaves and setbacks, and came through with the language that's in red there. Then a later application somehow deleted it. It was an unintended, not supposed to be here. So we're taking out the existing language there and putting in the new language that was previously recommended for approval and approved by the Board of County Commissioners, but then later, for whatever reason, overridden. So that's what this does. So just a reminder, this allowed it to be eaves to encroach. Awnings can go 3 feet into front and rear. You can do some cornices 3 feet inside. So we were trying to let this happen. I don't know that we need to discuss this. It's mostly the same board that actually recommended approval of this before, but we can certainly talk about anything you want to. This was an error on our part. So waterfront setbacks, this is the reason you're seeing this application is because the county commission wanted to discuss perhaps that in-ground pools without enclosures should also be given the 15-foot waterfront setback. Now I know you guys are seeing that we're not seeing all the variances we used to see for waterfront. It is working. It's working very well for neighborhood compatibility where you have the 5 averages for waterfront and no closer than on either side. That is working very well. We're seeing very few people that cannot build it that way. People are very happy. What they aren't happy about, apparently, is some in-ground pools are not subject to that. You see that right now we allow on natural grade slabs and decks without railings to go up to 15 feet from the high water line or the wetland line. And we debated that quite a bit in this board because of view, basically, and you don't want to have to, you're 35 feet, your new guy comes in next door and puts something 15, and now I've lost everything. So as far as view. So this board debated and said, yes, on natural grade slabs and decks without railings. Well, do you want to consider in-ground pools without enclosures? And I do recall the previous debate about this that said, well, no one's going to want a pool on the water without an enclosure. I think Mr. Bramlett made that point. That's a good point. I think it's uncommon because of bugs and whatever. But if you feel that that is appropriate with or without enclosures, that's something I do want this board to discuss and give feedback on, because that was the county commission's directive. So I want to talk about that one, please. And however you want to do it. We can do it now, or we can do it at the end of whatever.
Why are you taking out the seawalls or riprap?
Because it doesn't, what this is doing is saying that you can only do the 15 foot if you have a seawall, and now you have to do a seawall. No, that wasn't intended. So if you want to put a deck on, first you have to build a seawall, then you can do the deck, and that on-grade deck, that was not intended. So trying to clean that up, that we weren't trying to push seawalls on people. So they do backflow. They're not necessarily great for the environment. I'd rather people keep the natural lining, but there you go. That's the way it's worded. It's pushing people into seawalls if they want to take advantage of that slab or deck setback. So you want to debate them now, or at the end is one of all of them? It's up to you.
We can do them now.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say do them.
Let's do them.
Okay, so with this particular one, I do want some direction. I mean, obviously you can give direction for anything in here, but this one particularly, because it's coming from the county commission, would like to have your feedback on this.
Anyone want to start? Sherry?
The only thing I would say is some of these pools, that's going to be very specific that it's going to be an on-grade pool. Because like some of these in particular, I can think of some of them right off the top of my head where they want them built up same level or step down as the house because they're on the water, which is already going to be built up. So if they're doing these, that's going to be, you're going down to your pool that's actually on grade is what you're saying, right? 12 inches.
It doesn't say that, so because the comma and or, it doesn't really say on natural grade, but we can add that if you want to, if you think that's how it's appropriate.
I mean, if
I
not,
agree, it defeats the
then
whole
they're-
purpose
they're
if we
build-
don't.
They're building a 4, 5, 6 foot wall. That's their pool side of, that's going to enclose the pool.
And I do recall at least one county commissioner saying the enclosures were fine too, so we'll see.
What about the enclosures, though? I mean, basically aluminum with screening, but could it obstruct the view? Is there a neighborhood, characteristic thing there where, now you put up an enclosure? I don't know.
And that's what the board was wavering on. That's why we said we bring this back as to
Okay.
whether on grade or in or not on grade, just in ground pools with or without enclosures should be, they can still use the average and no closer on either side, but this would allow them to go up to 15 feet period, regardless of the neighborhood.
And it's, what is it now?
Right now, it's the average of the 5 closest, but no closer than on either side, just like any other structure. Pools are looked at as structures.
And the change would make it
15
feet
foot
no matter
period,
what,
right.
with or without an enclosure.
Well, it's up to you. Right now, it's proposed as without, but we can change it to not actually discriminating either way.
If you think about an enclosure, I mean, it's almost like it's a structure.
Is it?
Correct.
Yeah, but and you're talking 15 feet. If the water, if Ms. Cotu is at the water and you're at the house or the backside of the pool, that isn't a whole lot of distance to look down the canal if you want to do that, or the waterway. That pretty well blocks anybody who's not right up there against 15 feet as well.
I just want to make a point. I don't really have an opinion on that per se, but I've lived in the same house for 30 years on the water, and I can tell you that in Citrus County anyway, there is such a thing as sea level rise. And you can't really require a pool at grade or it'll be underwater half the year. At natural grade, it'll be underwater half the year. That's why they're building seawalls everywhere, is because you have to raise the seawall up to keep your yard from being underwater, because it's happening more and more. It's all last week it was that way.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, sorry.
I think we really need to address David's point, because I was just recently at a house that's under construction and the entire pool is raised up level with the back of the house. So, I mean, it's like a concrete, I mean, it's way the heck up there because it comes right off the house. So we need clarification on how staff's gonna deal with that, because I see that being a problem with interpretation for staff. Like how do you, I mean, if they're no taller than, I mean, this thing, when I walked to the edge of it, it was like it was really high. It was, I was afraid.
I mean,
like,
you're basically
technical
walling,
terms?
you're walling, if you're doing
Yeah.
that, you're walling your neighbors in.
Right.
Yeah, I walked to the edge and I was afraid I was gonna fall off because it was way up.
So it was basically built on top of the ground.
Oh, it was I guess the house like had the garage underneath the house and then the living areas. Then the pool was built up to the floor elevation of the house.
How
Oh,
often?
not even like the garage parking level?
No, it was up.
beyond that?
Yeah.
Oh,
They want
wow.
it the same level, that's what I'm trying to say. When you
Yeah.
walk out your back door, you're not going down steps, you're
Well,
going
that-
same level to the pool
That's
deck.
different than an enclosure. Enclosure
Right.
you can kind of see through.
Well, no,
there,
the
yeah.
enclosure is
Yeah,
the
but they're gonna say
That'd
screening.
be
doesn't have an
considered an
enclosure.
above-ground pool at that moment. We're talking about in-ground pool.
It's not really
Well,
an
building a
above-ground
pool.
It doesn't, yeah.
Infinity pool.
Currently, pools are treated like any other structure, and this is a, should they not be? Should they have that slab exception of 15 feet, or should we keep it as 5 average and no closer than either side?
How often does this come up, like as an issue?
For new pools, frequently, that's the one waterfront setback thing that people want to do that they can't, or they can. They have to do the average. They have to do the average of the area and put it in that way. I can only know of one person that's holding on, hoping this passes. And this is not staff's wording. This is simply something the commissioners wanted to discuss later, discuss in more detail. Should pools get that 15-foot like an on-grade slab or deck, or should they not?
That 15 feet comes from 1986, the 1886 zoning ordinance allowed for 15 feet.
So it's really up to you. There's a whole way to do this. You can completely strike through that section. You can do in-ground pools on grade. You can do it in-ground pools, period, with or without enclosures. There's options.
Joanna, how do we define in-ground pool what's the definition of in-ground pool?
Well,
As is
the
written.
one that Ms. Lynn was describing would not be an in-ground pool because that's raised up,
Now,
right?
we have a
I mean, technically, is there
definition
dirt around it? Yes, but that's not how we would define that. That would be, and I point taken. I think natural grade, and then Mr. Dixon's point of that's tough for people because of the water. But this is an exception they're asking for. It's up. I mean, 1 and 2 consider. I'm not saying it's supported in either way.
Well, here we have, it says 12 inches above grade. Is there like a definition for in-ground pool that could be clarified or defined, like something like that?
We can just use the same thing that we do for slabs or decks that, or in-ground pools on natural grade without enclosures, because it's defined there as what natural grade is.
I think that that's what it should be, honestly, because if you want to go 15 feet, then there's additional constraints. Sorry, because honestly, I don't agree with 15 feet.
Me neither.
I didn't agree with any of this. I didn't agree with less than 25 feet when we were dealing with all this before. It was everything was just forced, and that ended up being just the way it was anyway. I disagreed then. I still disagree. So if people want 15 feet, then it needs to be an on-grade, treated just like a deck or a slab, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because remember where some of this came up, we had some applications where folks were at the 35-foot line with the berm and swale.
Right.
And then they wanted to install the pool between their existing house and so it was within the 35 feet. And I think the board denied some of those at the time. And so this was a suggestion to alleviate that. So anybody now that's 35 feet who doesn't have a pool because they would have been within the 35 feet are now going to come in and want to put their pools if they want a pool.
20 with a 20-foot, they can go 20 feet if this is approved because it's 15.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we talked about the coastal A and and the velocity zones and stuff like that at 50 feet, and I don't know.
So it sounds like there might be a consensus to add in-ground pools on natural grade without enclosures. at the 15
That's
foot?
what my opinion is.
I agree.
I've got 3 nods. Any more? Any one more? Or not at all. That's always an option. I mean, you
Question regarding enclosures.
Mhm.
Are you defining enclosure strictly as a screen cage? Or are we gonna be looking at enclosure? What if someone wants to build a wall so that they have total privacy within their pool?
That would be a structure that's subject to that waterfront setback average. And I think I was saying 5 closest, and it's right there in front of you. It's 6 closest lots, plus no closer than either side. Walls are not going to be able to do any of these 15-foot automatic exemptions.
Could you just say screened
Yeah,
enclosures?
could you just
Yes.
add the word screen?
Without screen enclosures?
I like without enclosures. That pretty well chops everything off.
Oh,
What other kind of enclosure is there? Just curious.
Right. If it's doing walls, it's no longer a pool enclosure. You're going beyond that.
You could make it like a gazebo with just a roof and open.
Gazebos have to meet waterfront setbacks. They don't get that 15 foot. This is meant for on grade,
Yeah.
you know.
I think the way it's written, unless we just wipe the whole thing out and go back to 35 foot, which is not good.
It's too late for that.
And
which
it's-
is what you want.
It's a
I'll go
different,
with Mr.
it's
Stone
a
on that
different
one.
commissioner. You never know. Okay, so what I'm getting out of this is, removing the seawall mess, or in-ground pools without screen enclosures on natural grade.
I think you're limiting yourself if you put screen in there.
That,
So the objection
It already
to
says
screen
on
enclosures
natural
is
grade.
line of sight?
yes,
For the most part.
Is that something the county commissioners would like to see?
have not brought this before this new commission. I don't know.
I'm just, what's the motivation behind not having screen enclosures? Or what's the thinking? Yeah, not the motivation.
It's simply because this is a special exception for 15 foot regardless of the neighborhood for on-grade slabs and decks. So then saying, or if it's a pool, it's okay with an enclosure, it kind of takes out that whole idea. The idea was you meet the area or you aren't closer than either on side for anything above ground except a slab or a deck real close. So a pool would have to be the same. Once you add that enclosure, why put this forward and not a shed?
How many, in your experience, how many pools that are close to waterways have screen enclosures?
I don't have that data. I don't know. I don't actually
Almost
see
all
the
of them.
residential permits.
Because I sell them every day, almost all of them.
So I guess my question is, why are we specifying you can have a pool 15 feet, within 15 feet of the water line, but no screen enclosure when many homes have that already?
But most of them, they're not, that was predated, like it's not allowed now. It's when you go vertical is what they're talking about.
I
Right.
get it, but.
And the commissioner asked for this to be discussed for further discussion, and that's why it's before you. I'm not saying yay or nay. It's,
No, okay,
I mean, I think it gets looked at the same way. It currently says decks and slabs, 15 feet,
right,
nothing vertical. That was the whole discussion. I remember all that when we talked about all of that.
correct.
And then I also remember, I think it was Mr. Stillwell that came in and said that, oh, really, when you're on the water, you're not guaranteed the view on the peripheral. All you're guaranteed is what you have
right.
as far as your frontage. But that doesn't hold water for me, because you have this house over here they came and they built their house the way they were supposed to because they followed the code. And then we have, and now, like Miss Lynn made a statement a while back that really stuck with me, is we're starting to have less and less waterfront lots. The lots that are left, there's a reason that they're left, because they're smaller, they're more constrained. And now we're going to change the law for these people to come in here and be able to go closer, while the people on the side that did what they had to or spent more money and bought the bigger lot. And now we're obstructing their view. And I just don't think that that's fair to the community. Whether it's legal, right, or not, it just doesn't feel right to me.
A deck is not obstructing their view.
Nobody said a deck.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I agree with the deck and the concrete slab. If we're going to treat it, then it gets treated a pool gets treated exactly as those do. Not with, we're going to allow them to do that, and then, but this guy wants a deck, but he can't have a railing on it or something. That just, it doesn't Doesn't make
Seems to me
sense.
that we're legislating, bad word, but we're creating a rule to combat sheds, as you said, and walls and railings, but by the same token, that language is gonna prevent screen cages, which is a totally different thing. That's why we have the different words. It's just like the hedge and the wall and the fence. That's why we have different words for them. I remember once we had a discussion where somebody was saying something about a hedge is really a wall, but it's natural. It was one of the things we did.
Right. The current language restricts no railings or similar construction for decks. Exactly what some of you are saying. No vertical, and so pools, whether it's a pool structure in the ground or a slab or a deck in the ground, this would treat them similarly as proposed.
Whether or not you think a screen enclosure would obstruct view or not, I think it does. I think it does.
I think it 100% does.
So the language, it sounds like a consensus, or in-ground pools without screen enclosures on natural grade.
I don't know. I have a question though. Like when it says proposed structures, it just sounds weird. Is that what we have to call slabs and decks or whatever? Because it's
They are structures,
Yeah.
right? We have a definition for structure in the LDC, and they are structures. Yeah. A fence is not. So
right.
Would,
I mean, you could change it to just structures,
yeah.
not proposed structures.
Right.
Is that your issue?
I mean, but yeah, we didn't want to have to say, okay, now we're going to go back to all these sites and say you're out of compliance. That it's meant for new stuff. But I can take out that word if that's clearer.
For
Clearer.
new-
Just say
Yeah, right.
structures.
No, I like
Oh,
what you just,
my bad.
the way she just explained that makes sense. Like structures, if you take that proposed out, now you're saying structures, and somebody say, well, now all these are out of compliance.
Yeah, we don't want them
She's
non-conforming.
being new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's not what I was really talking about. I was
I know.
actually
I
asking
think
about
of
the
I
word
think of all the.
structure.
I'm thinking more repercussions here. So
Right, but then she said it's
yeah,
fine.
I got it.
okay, so I think I got somewhat of consensus, perhaps without enclosures.
Just one question, and this is purely speculation. If this gets approved as we just discussed, would that potentially bring requests for variances to us? New home, new pool. I want a cage, but I'll go through the process.
The same as any other structure today. You're not really seeing a lot of variances because people can comply with that for the most part. The 6 closest and no closer than either side, it would just be like that. So they wouldn't be eligible for a variance anywhere more than anyone else would. Case by case, is there a hardship? It's kind of hard on the pool enclosure.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we were saying them left and
Yes,
right.
yes. And you see, you're not anymore. So the variances have trickled down to almost nothing. So, all right, I'll move on a little bit. I'm sorry.
Are we going to take public comment?
Yeah, we are going to. So that's why I know I'm doing my presentation. Because it's not quasi, if you want to do public on each thing, we can. Is that what you want? I think they might, if I was a member of the public, I'd kind of want to talk on everything though, but it's up to you.
Yeah, we'll hold it till your presentation is over.
Okay.
But I think I need a break. We need to take a little break, if you don't mind.
Oh, gosh, yes.
You're the chair. You're the
Yes,
chair.
I know.
You're-
At
you're
this
in charge
time,
of
we
that.
will take a 10-minute recess and resume at 10:25. Thank you. I know. RVing is going in the woods with a shotgun.
None of this is on the record, right?
Yeah, it's all on the record.
She tapes it as a whole YouTube alternate channel with all that stuff. That'd be scary if it was.
Well,
Ready when you are.
who are we missing? Is there somebody sitting next to you?
No.
No.
Christmas past.
Okay. We'll go ahead and get back to the presentation, Joanna.
Yay. Okay. So here's the waterfront setbacks. We're going on to the next one. The land use tables, there's quite a lot of changes. What we're proposing is to take out those subheadings. And the reason is because people are seeing that and saying, oh, I'm allowed institutional, not ignoring the specific uses underneath. It was meant for staff to try to help us break it up and see it easier, but it is causing confusion in the public. So fine, the subheadings can come out. It's not changing any allowable uses by removing that residential and institutional. It was meant for our clarity, but the confusion is not worth it. So that's why those are going. Now you also see some others there. We're removing undefined or repetitive uses and some that don't have clarity. Now I'm going to show you the next screen on accessory structures. And home occupation is constantly a problem too, because it says it's allowed here. Oh, it's not allowed here. There's a whole separate section for home occupation, but it says P here. Doesn't mean you can just do it. There are requirements for what qualifies as a home occupation and how you can do that. But see it in the table here was confusing to people. The attached,
Joanna, can
I'm
I
sorry.
just ask you, okay, so you went on to the tables, but in our book, we have an addition for the coastal lakes. Does that come up?
I'm going to
after?
do that in the end. Yeah,
Okay.
that one's going to need a little bit more attention. I'm really just trying to highlight here, and we can I'm not skipping over anything. So attached housing, you're going to see that removed in a few sections. The reason is attached housing was meant at the time for those wing walls on a property line. It does not mean attached housing as multifamily is allowed in the conditional use in, for example, the RUR district. What it meant was if you have two RUR plots and you want to attach them at the lot line, you can do so. It's not clear. Obviously, you can still do that. We don't have that 5-foot setback requirement anymore. You can do that with authorization from the neighbor. So attached housing is being removed, not because you can't do wing walls, but because it's getting confused with multifamily in the public, and that's not what we wanted to have happen. Now, there are two things that I've worked quite a bit with Gaston Hall on this and Clark Stillwell to try to get some alternative views here, and we've had a lot of discussions. Neither one of them wanted to come today because they're happy finally with what I've got here. But so at the very bottom of every land use table, what's proposed, it's not in front of you. This is something that came out of our discussions. Is note the uses outlined may have additional requirements as outlined in probably two outlines there as outlined in this LDC. The uses listed, I guess, instead of outlined, because that's FYI. It might say home occupation, but there's more to it. It might say multifamily, but you still have to meet certain density, et cetera. So it's just a clarity to tell people this table looks great, but that doesn't mean you can do it. Accessory structures proposed for removal, and the reason is we're having people in code compliance say, see, it says I can have an accessory structure in that land use district. It doesn't say, yeah, but you need that principle first. So it's elsewhere in the code. It's getting away with it, but they're not getting away. It's elsewhere in the code and it's fine, but this clarifies. So instead of removing it, it's a strike through in the draft before you. Put it back in, but add must have principal residential structure in place, making it clearer for them.
Joanna, with accessory structures, when you look at 3101 and 3102, it's all addressing residential. Is there a place where we address commercial, or does that apply anywhere?
There's not a place to address it other than the whole section about commercial in the code where we have the small box, big box type standards. Yeah, so the land use tables, if it's a commercial, you're continuing with commercial with accessory. It's not listed as one of the uses.
Okay.
The PDR entirely strike through. That's not trying to get a freak out there. People are seeing that and saying, see, I can do anything in the PDR zoning. Of course not. You're subject to the master plan. So rather than list all the possible things some master plan might say, it just says subject to master plan. Trying to make it clear. Like I said, people are reading these tables. A lot of people from out of state are coming here or seeing things on Zillow or whatever and looking at these tables and thinking, I'm good to go. and they're not. So we also removed some of the uses that aren't defined. I have no idea what a small retail shop is versus a retail. We have no definition for that. Some of those things are not defined. We have outdoor cafe versus restaurant. That wasn't meant to be any different standards. So some of those kind of items are proposed for removal. We do have some new ones. Event venue, that's coming up more and more. So what we're proposing is to allow an event venue without lodging in RUR, all of these event venue with lodging, with a PUD in some of the commercial CLC, NEC, REC, and AGR. We're not putting that in GNC. They don't belong there. These are, I want to do the wedding chapel and I want to have the people stay here and do the wedding celebration. Don't have those in our code right now. This could allow them possibly in RUR, or we can change that to a CU if you think so, or a PUD. And some of them want to stay overnight, so this would allow it with a PUD before you on very specific land uses. CLC, which, because we know people like the coast, neighborhood commercial or on major roads, recreation is already recreation, and ag is pretty remote areas.
In your opinion, why would an event venue without lodging, or even with, why would that not apply in GNC?
Because event venue in GNC can go already today. That's not changed. But the event venue is not allowed anywhere else. And where people are wanting them and sometimes putting them without permits is the rural areas, because that's the attraction, is the nature background, not 44 whizzing behind you.
Okay.
You can do a wedding chapel in GNC now.
Because you said it didn't belong there. And
I meant the kind that we're seeing where they're nature oriented and they're staying there. Obviously, you can do hotels, you can do chapels, you can do event halls, but this is for when you want to do a nature type thing with the nature lodging outside of the commercial districts.
Barn weddings.
Farm weddings, yes, very, very popular.
Do you have to have a bathroom within 300 feet?
You'll have to, more than that, you have to meet Florida building codes, so that's a lot stricter. Yeah. So feedback on that, great. It's something we don't have right now. We have some operating within code compliance. We're going to keep getting the requests. They're more and more popular. And we have some beautiful land out there to do this in. So where should they go? Very restrictive. Also pushing car washes and mini warehouses into the PUD instead of the conditional use. This is something that we've got feedback from not only this board, but also the county commissioners, is we're seeing more and more mini warehouses. This would also apply to the storage air lots like RV storage, RV parking, boat parking. They would, instead of a conditional use stopping here, they would go to a PUD. They would be allowed in light industrial if somebody wants to do one of those there. It's doubtful, but mini storage should be allowed in light industrial and is not currently. And in the PSI district, for some reason, that's our public, semi-public institutional, they're allowed right now. That was not intentional. That should not be going on a government lot here, like putting a car wash outside here. That wasn't good. So that's proposed to be removed completely there. And you can stop me if you want. All right, one more change. This is actually coming from our Public Works Department. Is for subdivisions that want to have more than 75 units. Right now, it's preferred to have their connection point be on a collector, and they're proposing to remove the word preferred. Now, just some clarifications. If you're in a PUD, your access points are already designated. This has nothing to do with that. This would be a residential subdivision of 75 units outside of some master plan. That I cannot recall what the last time this came up, but we have an applicant right now that's outside of a master plan and wants to do more than 75 units and have both access points on a local road. I got nothing in the code that can say they can't do that. And that's frustrating because the people on the local road do not want this, but there's no public hearing required because it's allowed by zoning. So after talking to Public Works, they really think that if you're doing that many units, you should be coming off of a collector road, not a local road. But obviously this would not apply to things like PUDs, Citrus Hills, Brentwood, Meadowcrest. They've got their own standards and their own access points. This will clear up if we ever get one again without a PUD, they need to go on a collector. And now we'll talk about the one that said I skip, but I wasn't trying to skip it. So this came up in the last application, and we're not discussing the last one because that one's closed. But what's happened here, in the future land use element, there is a clause under CL, and I should have indented that A a little better to make it clear. It's under the heading of CL. Higher density development is permitted only if in accordance with the following provisions. And then there's a list of things. You can do a PUD. It has to be 160 acres. You can go up to one dwelling per 5 acres instead of 1 to 20. You have to have regional water and sewer. You have to be 1,000 feet from the St. Martin's Marsh. I don't think I did the whole thing there. Oh, there it is. So, shoot, I'm sorry. Can you get me back? I closed it. Thank you. So this is where the items about the CL that y'all were quoting earlier for St. Martin's came from. It came from, yeah, if you have CL, it's 1 unit per 20 acres or 1 unit per 40 out in the velocity zone. But if you've got a special area where it's 160 acres, you can possibly go up to 1 to 5. You can have that higher density, but you have to meet all these standards. And one of them was the 1,000-foot setback. It was not a, hey, if you're around the marsh, we have 1,000-foot development setback. It was, if you want to use this special density, here's what you got. Now, what's proposed in this code to try to clear that up, never in a million years thought somebody would interpret it this way, but it's not clear. So it says planning developments for higher density development may be allowed, and there's the list that's from the comprehensive plan. That's in our comp plan right now. I can't really remove that with this application. So it's an option if somebody's in the CL district and they have 160 acres and they can get the regional, because that's in the comp plan, and make all this fine. Absolutely. Now you'll see a little notation at the top there, and coastal A. That's just because it says V, and it should also be coastal A. This is for higher density development in the CL district only. And that's all this is. It's not saying that all PUDs in CL have to meet this. It's if I want to go 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, I can do it, maybe meeting all this criteria. So that's what's in here. It's been misinterpreted for another application. Ordinance amendments don't backdate. It would never apply to the other application in any way. It's not CL anyway, but understand the confusion. We're trying to clear it up so that it matches what's actually in the comp plan and is consistent. I put that bold in there because that's what that is. It's a special clause just in case somebody wants to do a PUD in CL. And if you don't think that's appropriate, maybe a future comp plan amendment, we can take out this. Nobody's ever done this, so at least it's to my knowledge.
I have a question about the higher density development.
Mm-hmm.
Higher density than what it says here?
Then 1 to 20 or 1 to 40. So you can see up above, the predominant land uses are single family at a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres. If they want higher density, and number 2 in the land development code, I think it was a different number on the comp plan, the second bullet, they can go up to 1 unit per 5 acres with all these bullets. If they can meet all these hoops, they can do it. And like I said, I don't recall an actual person trying to do this. That's a lot to have to undertake. And that regional water and sewer that's in the comp plan is even harder. It's very hard to get regional water and sewer out in the area, out in the coastal area, and get 160 acres.
Doesn't that circumvent the comp plan though?
No, the comp plan says exactly the same thing.
Because I thought the comp plan was 1 per 20.
It is, except for this is existing language. Higher density development is permitted only in accordance with, and that's already in there, and it says 1 to 5 with this special PUD. It's in there already. It's been in there for a long time. But like I said, if you don't like it in the comp plan, a future comp plan amendment, we can propose to remove this. I've never seen anybody do it, but it's 160 acres, possibly 1 to 5 with these criteria that's already in the comp plan.
But can somebody circumvent this whole thing by just saying, I want to put it in an RV park, and then
RV park is not density. Didn't really ask me. I would have loved to have jumped in, but RV park is not density. They are not residential units. They're not how many units per acre. It's intensity. It's a commercial. Those are transient uses that have to come in and out. It's kind of like a hotel type of thing. You cannot, but in this case, for an RV park, per statute and per code, you can't stay there permanently. They're not density. So there's not a circumvent because that's not density. They're not increasing people living there. There are people staying there and have to leave.
But actually they are increasing people being there.
And you could say the same about a hotel or a conference, a hall, a retail store.
So can you build a hotel in a coastal and lakes region?
In a CL? No.
With a
But you can't do an RV park either.
we just did.
No, you did it in proposing to change to an RVP zoning. In this case, if you wanted a hotel, you can change it to Coastal Lakes Commercial, for example. But it's not the same. RVs are transient uses. They are commercial. They are not residential density.
Okay, but this doesn't give any protection against a coastal lakes designated area where you can move in and request the designation to be changed and put it in a hotel or a,
Right. Absolutely not. The comp plan is not designed to not let people apply for things. They can ask for anything they want. They have to get it approved.
Commissioner Stone, we wouldn't be here if you know, like we're here because we hear deviations from the code and things like that. That's why we're here.
Right.
We wouldn't have a PDC if
But the designation that it is now was not drawn arbitrarily. We aren't just here. That's what I keep saying. Are all these designations?
no, but it was drawn 30 years ago,
on
30
the
plus
land
years
use
ago.
map? Are they just, all these designations? Are those just placeholders until something better comes along, higher tax rate, or somebody wants to make some more money off of it? Was there any thought given to the future land use map to say that, well, maybe this is how we would like our community to develop?
I don't know. It was done so long ago.
Like I said, is it just a placeholder until something better comes along? And I think there was some thought went in, or I hope there was some thought that went into the future land use and thought that, yes, we're kind of a unique area, the nature coast, okay? And so we don't do the same thing that we would do in Broward County, which never met a developer they didn't like.
Just because something's old doesn't mean it's bad. Ten Commandments still works.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, theoretically, we're going in philosophy here. I did skip over some of the more specific items if you want to talk about any of them. I've highlighted the big changes. Obviously, the land use tables with all their strike-throughs look like a big deal. They're really just for clarity and for formatting. Other than, like I talked about, the car wash, the mini storage, and the event venue. Those are new.
I want to mention something about the tables.
Mm-hmm.
The strike through of residential, institutional, recreational. So how is that going to look without those headings?
Those headings will be gone, and we'll have them all listed there.
Just straight listed.
Because
I hate that.
I do too.
I don't like that we have to dumb down because people lack comprehension skills.
Wow, story of my life. But I don't have a way to do that of, even alphabetical. Would I know to look for group home? I don't know.
I mean, it's clearly stated with a C and a P. Like, just because you can't read what the heading says doesn't mean that we need to make it easier for you to understand. I kind of like the way that this is broken down because you can go, okay, I'm thinking about doing this. It's a residential use. Oh, can I do that? Home occupation? It's permitted. Oh, and this one's, it's conditional. It's a conditional use. So I know maybe I should call somebody.
Right. And we can if we get that consensus, we don't have to remove them. It's really.
I mean, what you're telling me and I'm hearing you saying is because somebody sees it says residential on the top, then they go, oh, so I can do anything residential in that area. It literally says it right there when that's a heading. That's not a description.
That's exactly what I'm saying. But if you don't think that's appropriate or it's not going to help things, it's going to make it worse or whatever,
I don't know if it would help or not. I just would want to see the list because I know when you get lists and they're all just like, it's just a straight list and it looks like a spreadsheet, like it's hard to read.
You have a clean copy.
And it's hard. It's not the easiest to read because you're used to the headings. I get that.
Right.
Here's like page 22, 23.
I don't know. I just don't like it.
I know at least one member of the public's anxious to talk. Do you have anything else you want to discuss? Or I'm not going anywhere. It's not quasi, so you guys can jump in anytime.
Excuse me, Joanna, just going back to what Dave said, which formatting do you like better, with the headers or without?
Yeah, it's not a matter of what I like better. The headings were there for staff's benefit. We used to have a beautiful table that showed every listing and what land uses is allowed. We loved it. But then the new code did this. And for staff's convenience, we broke it up into residential, institutional, commercial, but it has caused some confusion. So
Is there another way to get rid of the confusion? As far as, is there a way to put some type of note
residential
on top?
C below only or something? Yeah, we can do something like that.
And this way here, you still end up with what you got, Dave.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we can put the clarifier on there and not do a full strike through, sure.
Are all these medical marijuana treatment centers, you're adding all of those too?
No, those are existing.
Okay.
The commission voted to treat those as pharmacies. So if a pharmacy is allowed in the land use district, so are the medical marijuana treatment centers. That was the option the statute gives them, is completely nay or like pharmacies.
Why is telephone and cable facilities conditional as in the PSO?
Because well, that's a good question. I don't really know. It's not something we were looking at for this. We were focusing on certain things. That's existing. Yeah, and most likely it's more of a, when you think about it, it's more of a kind of industrially type use in an office area. It's not meant for an office. Office absolutely can. But if you're doing the
Like those phone.
the yards
thing,
where they have
whatever they have,
and they
the buildings.
equipment would be allowed, but you're doing the yard where you have the whole bunch of overhead trucks. That's probably what it was. That's an existing thing. We can certainly look at that at a future amendment. Mr. Stillwell has a full list of me for a future amendment, so you'll see another amendment sometime as soon as I can get to it.
Would that be something like a cell tower?
No, cell towers are listed separately on where they're allowed.
This says transmission towers.
For
Transmission towers are separate though.
yeah, that's not the same thing as a
And that's
telecommunications
permitted.
tower.
That's a
Yeah.
different thing.
Yeah, the telecommunications towers are defined, and we have a whole section of land development code on exactly where they can go.
I just wanted to, okay, so I noticed where you put the event venues with and without lodging, but there are some places where it's not listed, and if it's not listed, it's just assume that it's okay?
No, if it's not listed,
No.
it's not allowed.
Because it's not, I didn't see it on this general commercial, and now that we've added this.
Right, and I don't think it should be. An event venue is like we talked about the farm weddings. You can already have wedding
But
chapels.
you said it's already allowed in
Right.
GNC.
Because I wouldn't call it an event venue in that particular case. I think that would be a wedding, a hall, or a depends on how you want to put it. But it's already allowed in general commercial. It's not called an event venue. Not defined event venue here. It's a little hard to define, but
What's it called?
what?
It's called wedding?
Well, no, it's not called. See, the land development, the tables are never going to have every listing that you can think of, so we try to interpret. So if somebody came here, let me look at what that would probably be.
Event venue seems like a general term. I understand you guys mean it as a barn wedding, but I mean, it could also just mean a hall.
Well, we
I
have
mean,
tavern, bar, lounge, nightclub, dance hall under P in general commercial, and I think that would probably fall under that. The event venue that is being defined there is a whole different animal than an event hall, like you're talking about in a commercial. So the venue is the farm wedding type, the outdoors. They're probably going to have some outdoor components. A tavern, bar, and whatever the heck a dance hall is allowed in general commercial.
Anybody else have any questions?
What's silviculture?
Trees, growing trees,
That's trees?
tree harvesting and tree nursery. Yeah, not nursery, but harvesting.
I learned something.
I know.
Thank you.
I didn't know what farriers were either, so who knows? We're learning.
Doing an outdoor event, then you could also be mudding,
Mudding,
big four-wheel drive trucks.
true. So it'd be allowed in RU. Well, I don't know. We have outdoor arena, so it did depend. If they're doing an arena, that's a little different. That probably pushes you into the arena area, which is more of our industrial type areas. I see Liz smirking over here. She likes mudding.
Mike, everything that's crossed out, are you getting rid of?
That's proposed for removal.
So instead of having sections, you'll just have a long list.
Right. And that's Mr. Bramlett does not like.
The event venue with lodging would be in the same list as golf driving range and miniature golf.
It's not a, they have no relation to each other. They're just another item under the list.
What's wrong with having sections?
Mr. Bailey just had that big discussion with me, and Mr. Bass had an alternative what I think might be a happy medium. So instead of taking out the sections completely, we can do something like institutional as outlined below on each one, putting in that word, and those words, and then hopefully that triggers somebody to say, oh, okay, we can do that. That's a nice compromise.
I would just say that in my experience, and I have quite a bit of it of trying to idiot-proof stuff, it's impossible. Because you can try and define things 19 ways to Sunday and somebody's going to interpret it one way. I would just say that I appreciate the things that you do and whatever's going to make your job easier to be able to explain to the public and to make it less chaotic with all the chaos that's already going on, then I support it. But I would want you to explain to me one thing that you said. In the old land development code, we used to have this and we loved it. What did you have and why don't we have it then?
We called it Appendix G, and it was wonderful because what it had is every land use district on a table and every use, and you would just go, oh, okay, I want to do a event venue. I can do it in this one, and I can do it in this one.
Why do we not have that anymore then?
I don't know. It was just removed, and we just haven't put it back.
Because it's that's the kind of like, it sounds like a picture,
Yeah,
which is kind of where we're going with things now. When you have words people don't understand, you have to just draw a picture for them.
Yeah, point taken. We can have staff work on something like that. I finally almost got a full staff again, so maybe.
Okay.
Miss Lynn, was there a reason that you can think of that you remember why it was taken out?
It was before me. I think it was in the 2012 revision, and I'm not sure why they did the things they did back then.
Okay.
Neither am I.
Does anybody have any more questions for Joanna?
A different director at the time.
I would just make another comment too, that clearly an accessory structure, the definition of accessory alone should mean that it's not primary. But again,
oh, thank you.
I totally agree.
You
with
want
I
to
totally
write my
agree.
brief that I have to write?
Yeah,
I'm in the middle of writing a brief that's due Tuesday on
Yeah.
this issue.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will open to the public, so if you would like to come up and share your thoughts about the ordinance amendments, please do.
I get to be first. Hi, Mike Serwinski, environmental consultant, professional address 2716 South Lecanto Highway. Setbacks, especially wetland setbacks. So I want to base this discussion on science. The reason we have the wetland setback is for stormwater, wetland, water quality protection. That's the primary reason it was established. So there's a question early on in the discussion about seawall and riprap. And Gaston Hall, some stakeholders, we all met with staff, probably going on 2 years now, to discuss these principles. So in cases where you have, I always like to start from the scientific principle of you're doing stormwater protection. You need to know what the existing conditions are to be able to know what you're protecting. So where there is a natural buffer, we have a 50 and 35 foot setback. And the reason is to protect that buffer to the wetlands or to the water body beyond. That natural buffer is supposed to stay there. 15 feet is the minimum because the 15-foot natural buffer is supposed to be there. Where am I going on this? Is because most of your older subdivisions with seawalls and riprap do not have that natural buffer anymore. It's grass. And the best thing we could do about that is not fertilize it, not cut it, and let the clippings go in the water. So in those cases, a 15-foot pool is appropriate. In places where you have a natural buffer, what you don't want to be doing is encroaching on that natural buffer and cutting down those trees which protect against erosion, absorb nutrients, cutting down those trees and putting a pool structure. So we have to start with what is the existing conditions. Is it an existing subdivision with seawall and riprap where there's homes already there that's been permitted ages ago? Or do we allow a blanket 15-foot setback, even in those cases where a natural buffer exists? So I don't know how we're gonna go about doing it in the right way, but you can't give a 15-foot pool setback blanket on every single condition, because you would be defeating the purpose of the setback. Even though there's no runoff associated with a pool or contaminants, what you are doing is, if you're removing that natural buffer, those trees that protect against erosion, then you're going to create water quality conditions downstream, or in fact right there. In the real world, we have people all the time coming to us that say, we need a wetland jurisdiction line on this property. And it's after they've gone in and cleared and not even put a silt barrier up. And our first response to them is, you need to have a 15-foot natural buffer. You need to put that silt screen barrier there, either on the wetland or at that 15-foot, before you continue any further. Part of the way we go about establishing a wetland jurisdiction line is we use soils, hydrology, and vegetation. And if half that vegetation is gone, we have to rely on soils. We can't rely on all three factors. And people are doing it all the time on residential lots. They're clearing in those buffers without permits. And I think the way our code enforcement is now, what is it? They can't drive by and see it and report it. It has to be reported by someone, which is not right either. So that is, I hope I haven't made that any worse for you, but that's the circumstances where, okay. You need to look at existing conditions. If there's a seawall and riprap, 15-foot is fine, because you don't have that natural buffer. In areas where there is a natural buffer, and maybe we need to define that natural buffer, then I think we need to stay with the 35-foot. And on all these circumstances, you still have to do a stormwater plan, an engineered stormwater plan if you're on the water. Is that not correct?
That's my understanding.
Yep. Okay.
So you want to leave it the way it is?
No, I think in cases where there's a riprap and a seawall and the lack of a natural buffer, then the 15-foot is allowable.
Although this is forcing people to build seawalls. What's happening is they're building a seawall to get this. And that's not what we wanted.
And I understand that. I understand that. So some of the state rules are, there's an exemption for people building seawalls of 150 feet or less if there's existing seawalls to the right and left of them. So I'm not sure if those permits are also reviewed at the county, and maybe they should, because a new seawall or riprap has to go through a higher level of review at the DEP on single-family lots, or at SwiftMud for commercial lots. And I'm not even sure that a seawall has to come through you guys, or riprap. We have other situations, like in Homosassa on the island where they built the bridge to. I can't remember the name of it.
Xanadu Path.
Right, Cherokee. Yeah, Cherokee Trace. Thank you. All of a sudden, somebody was putting in riprap and taking down the trees in the natural buffer. I called DEP on it. DEP did absolutely nothing. They actually had equipment in the water, heavy equipment, disturbing, creating sediment and turbidity, no silt barriers up, and DEP just lax. Now I have, Clark Stillwell calling me to represent a client there that wants to put a seawall. I'm like, well, if they wouldn't have removed the natural buffer that actually was approved by SwiftMud to stay a natural buffer, they wouldn't have problems with erosion and need a seawall. I'll get off my high horse on that one. If I can go to accessory structures. The only question I have about accessory structures is, you have been, and I may be interpreting this the wrong way, one of the ways you get away from people not being able to use a platted lot where they are all wetlands is you have been, to get away from those lawsuits, I forgot the name of the guy that, what is it? Bert Harris, thank you. Bert Harris lawsuits is you have been allowing for instance, Homosassa, there's a lot of all wetland lots on these canals. You have been allowing them to put a deck and accessory structure to store canoes, kayaks, to allow them reasonable use of their property. Would this then mean that you can no longer do that for those people?
No one can put a dock or a deck on accessories on lots by themselves. That's not allowed. There's a provision to allow a dock if you can show that you absolutely have no way to mitigate and get a structure there, but there's no provision to store kayaks or sheds on there. That's not allowed.
That's not what I was told.
Yeah, it's not allowed. So someone unfortunately told you wrong. It might be a city, but not the county.
They'd be everywhere if you allowed that.
Yeah, they would.
Okay. I've been
It's
misled.
not saying people don't do it.
Yeah, that might be what's doing it.
They just
No.
put them up.
No, it was my understanding that staff has directed folks that they could put something to lock up their oars, their
Yeah, they like them, but we don't allow it.
okay.
And if you hear about any of those, you should let us know.
Let code compliance know.
Okay, the CL. Commissioner Stone, I think you're absolutely right. We have a blueprint. Coastal lakes, that's meant to be protected 1 per 20, 1 per 40. There should be no allowances for anything more than that. You get into 160 acres, that's at 5 units per, 1 unit per 5 acres, that's 32 units you could put in a coastal zone, coastal and lakes on 160 acres. That's almost like a ranch, a 5-acre subdivision like Shenandoah down there on 480. I don't think we should be allowing it. Those areas need to really be protected. They're meant to be, hey, own 160 acres out here. I want to put a house for me and my children or my guests. That's fine. Ag, we need to be protecting ag. You see what's happening in the villages. All that land is ag land that's turning into the villages. We really need to protect our ag land for a number of reasons. Number one is protect against future development. Make sure that in the future we have lands that can absorb rainfall, recharge our aquifer, that can be used in a productive way. The more things we allow in ag, the less it's going to be protected. I know of some very large acreages right now, some that have been bought for $5 million because of what's happening over at the villages. And although it may not now be in the central planning district and the water and sewer district where we're directing things, those are prime development, and we're going to lose our ag, our green space, our blue space. There's a lot of ag right now in Citrus County. And you can say, well, we have 50% that's in public lands, but don't count on that being ag forever if we continue to allow things like nursing homes, other things in that table on ag. If it's a bona fide related to agricultural use, and I know these are already existing in the code. What I'm saying is we really need to take a close, hard look at that. They should not be allowed. There's certain things in there that just shouldn't be allowed in an agricultural district. It's not related. How is a nursing home related or a group care home related to agriculture? I can agree with event venue. There's ways that we need to protect agricultural use. And event venue is one of those ways that agriculture is looking to increase their revenue besides crops and cattle and so forth. As long as that isn't a principal use, as long as it's like an accessory within a certain acreage limit. And I think that's it for my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Karen Esting. I have to agree with Mr. Brainlet about the categories. you should keep them residential and have them because if you just clump them all together, it looks like when you look at a heading, it's like a la carte all the way down and you get to pick and choose. So I agree with his statement. Regarding some of the things that are on the comp plan amendment, in section 2401, which is in coastal lakes, it says that PUDs would be allowed under certain circumstances. And I have to disagree and because that can be used widespread throughout smaller areas here in our county. And I think because that allows more density, you can, you're allowing more density into these areas that should be protected. And also when you start doing that as a matter of right and allowing that, it would be, you're just setting a precedence for the future of degrading these areas. And I think in speaking when Mike was just said, we need to protect these areas. Number one, these are estuaries. These are, if anybody goes fishing, you really need to realize that's where a lot of the homes are of ruin everything, then they go out into the ocean when they get bigger. So we need to protect certain things in these areas. And also, when in another district, I was going to say in recreation, you're going to add in 2418 is another PUD instance. You're talking about camping and all this. Well, I was looking up in the Withlacoochee State Park, you have 55,000 acres to camp. You have 3 camping sites that have a wide diversity of things that you can do. I think we should have people go into our forest and take a look at that instead of taking into these recreational areas and putting a PUD maybe as a matter of right and setting a precedence. And again, our AU districts, to add these venues and everything, you have to think also as compatibility with the neighbors. Some of the AU areas, they may abut a residential area, and so you're going to have incompatibility issues that you're not really seeing on a piece of paper in front of you, because I've seen this happen already several times. You have noise, you have lights, you have hours of operation. If they have a product on their on an AU district and they want to have people come in and visit their farm and they sell their goods, jams, jellies, or whatever, I don't have a problem with that. It's supplementing an income. But to keep adding PUDs as a matter of right, I think is wrong in all these districts. And I think you really need to look at, and also the people in these areas where you're adding these, your neighbors and everything there have property rights. And we're forgetting about the adjoining neighbors and people around about having property rights. And that's why you have people coming here angry saying, I moved here. But reconsider what you're doing when you make these changes in your comp plan and make sure there is no issues. And just have a full discussion on that, especially in coastal lakes. We really need to protect those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
PJ Offhammer. To follow up on what Karen was saying, compatibility is huge, and it should be a huge part of you making your decisions on anything. The people who are there and in the surrounding areas, they certainly have rights, and they should not be abridged for somebody who's coming in and wants to change the world. I just have a couple questions about the coastal lakes or comments. Joanna says that there's a misrepresentation about the 1,000-foot buffer for St. Mark's Preserve. And I would question as to why it's okay to have a buffer required for residential, but it's not required for an RV park. You're still filling it with people. If you have 100 slots in an RV park that's on the boundaries of St. Mark's Preserve, you could have as many as 400 people there. On scalloping season, you could probably have 600 people there. And they can stay there for up to 6 months. Don't tell me that that's not residential. If it's transient and they're going for 2-3 days, okay, you can call that transient. But the people who come and they stay for 6 months, they don't just have, they have their little shelters, they have their chairs, they have their own personal fire pits. They live there for 6 months. So we need to stop considering them as just transients and not an impact on the environment, because they are very much an impact on the environment. And that is not acceptable. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Robin Orlandi, Dunellen. I just wanted to say that everything Mr. Serwinski said, I would say it again, except I've only got 3 minutes. And to Mr. Stone's point, I just want to quote, this is from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, their Aquatic Preserve Act, which ties in again with your coastal resilience planning and the Citrus County Local Mitigation Strategy, Chapter 113, 3.1, that not only do we have the largest concentration of freshwater springs in the world, in the 5-county area, but our seagrass from Tampa up to Steinhatchee is the largest contiguous coastal spring-fed wetland in the world. That's what you're protecting. So when you're talking about CL, protecting that is, it's not just a local duty, it's an international duty. But what that does is the thing that people are coming to see, that all your laws and things are for, is that. I grew up in Florida in St. Pete. I was down in the Keys. I watched those areas get gobbled up. I remember when the Villages was orange groves. I would drive through there 27 multiple times a year. I don't want to go look at the Villages. I don't want to go look at the Keys. Now they're covered in sargasso weed and development and still seepage from too many septic tanks, even though they've worked themselves to death to try to address that. Nobody can fight Big Sugar down there. We've got something here that's a huge economic draw. These coastal fisheries are protected, the sports fishing, the shellfish, the food fish, all of your traditional fishermen, that industry is protected by the health of these marshes. And this thing about people cutting, when they cut away that buffer protection, that right now, it's just affecting them. But in 20 years, it's going to affect properties that haven't flooded yet west of 19. The science on this is clear. There's loads of things I could reference you to if you're interested. So, my point being that that strategic plan from the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council that Administrator Howard just got a grant for the Salapopka chain of lakes to try to mitigate that flood risk. That document, when this planning is taking place, those two should be considered together because it not only protects the environment, it protects our economy, and again, the future for all of us who live here. I didn't move here to see buildings and more development and seawalls and, you know, everything that's happening in Lecanto. We moved here to be in the wild environment. You've got a gem. Please, please protect it. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Maxine Connor, Homosassa. I just have a few questions on the sections that we were just discussing, or you were. In section 1604, where it talks about the Director of Public Works rendering official interpretations of provisions in the Land Development Code, referring to the stormwater management and transportation system standards. I'm wondering if that Director of Public Works is now in charge of those decisions, and is that because of these things have to be, especially stormwater management, has to be decided by an engineer. So, do we have the assurance that it's been engineered before the Public Works Director approves it? That's my question. Because I remember that discussion from a few months back when we were all talking about waterfront setbacks. And then a question on the low-intensity coastal and lakes. I just wanted to confirm, I'm hearing that the 1,000-foot buffer does not apply when there's an RV park, and I don't understand the reason why. So that's my question there. Looking at the Recreation District 2418 and the Recreational Vehicle Park 2422, I'm having trouble telling the difference, and when I looked under recreational vehicle park, I noticed it doesn't list RV park or campground, and I just wondered why. Is it just understood because they're allowed because that's the title of the district? I didn't understand why they weren't listed in the table. And then, let's see. That was my question there. And then I had a question on where we talked about section 28, and it just was under types of uses. And it said the section contains a list of allowable uses in each land district described in the comp plan and the LDC. And specific uses are either permitted, allowable subject to PUD, and this is the part I have a question on, or prohibited as incompatible with the intent and character of the district. So here's my question. I wonder how compatibility is defined. Is it scientific, and does it have special things it has to, criteria that they use to determine compatibility? Because at the PDC hearing on February 16 concerning the RV park that day, I heard one of the commissioners say that changing the land use district to RV park was compatible. So there's my question. What's the criteria for compatible? And then the other question I had is regarding LCD definitions for recreational resort. Now, would camping sites qualify under recreational resort? And I heard in the conversation on February 16th hearing that the glamping sites would be movable within 24 hours, unless I heard that wrong. So are they, or maybe they were referring to the sewer, the septic being disconnected. So anyway, do glamping sites qualify under recreational resort? Or I think the answer to that is they belong under RV park. And then the other question on the discussion today would be, and I'm sorry I had to say all these at once, but that's the way it's set up here. So why would you want a pool without an enclosure? Because wouldn't your homeowner insurance require that you have it? And wouldn't it be just morally obligation that you should protect anyone from falling in your pool and drowning? Okay, so those are my questions. I'm sorry to have to say them all at once.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Anyone?
Good morning again. Mike Wilburn, Local Engineering Inc., P.O. Box 938, Floral City, Florida. I apologize. I typed something out and I left it on my printer, so I'm reading it from my phone. That's my first apology. Second apology is going to be in just a moment. I received an email from Ms. Katu with these discussion documents well over a month ago. And I was under the impression, this is my ignorance, that this was more of a workshop and less of a formal setting. And so my second apology is to Ms. Lynn and Ms. Katu. I met with them last year, towards the end of the year, to discuss some of the things I'm about to say. And I thought this was the opportunity to do that. And so I wasn't being secretive. This is just the format I thought it was supposed to be in. I want to address or look at or maybe pique you guys' ears to look at the tables. And here's why. The Religious Land Use Act and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000, which is called the RULUIPA Act, requires governments to treat religious and secular assemblies and institutions equally. Section 2B1 requires local governments to treat religious assemblies the same as secular assemblies when implementing zoning and land use regulations. And then the same section, B3A and B, also says this, that this act prohibits local governments from imposing land use regulations that totally exclude or unreasonably limit religious assemblies from a specific jurisdiction when allowing secular assemblies. And so I don't think that is on purpose. I think it, like you, in your discussion with Ms. Katu, there are other things that probably could be fixed in these tables, but I want to highlight several of them that I believe need to be revised in our table. And the first one is the easiest one. In our high-density residential code currently, houses of worship are allowed as a conditional use. However, community centers, fraternal organization lodges, dance halls, martial arts facilities, and instructional studios are all permitted without a conditional use. And so I think that is not an equal representation. In the currently light industrial district, LIND, houses of worship are not allowed. But as we've even heard from discussion today, taverns, bars, nightclubs, lounges, dance halls, and restaurants are all permitted with a P. The third district, heavy industrial district, IND, houses of worship are not permitted. However, fraternal organizations, lodges, offices, dance halls, bars, taverns, and nightclubs are permitted, not with a conditional use, just permitted. Mobile home district, MHP, houses of worship are currently not permitted in our LDC. Actually, they're not even mentioned in that district. While community centers, fraternal organization, lodge, small retail shops, specialty food stores are permitted. Same thing with RVP, recreational vehicle park, houses of worship are not permitted. And those two, the mobile home park and the RV park, as well as the rec district, those are kind of interesting because sometimes I have an applicant that comes forward and they want to design an RV park, they want to design a mobile home park. And I've heard some of you will never camp, but I've heard some of you do camp. And some of these places that we go to in other parts of the country, even other states up north in the mountains, a lot of these facilities have chapels or something like that on site that is a benefit to the park. And we don't have a venue or an avenue in our blocks of items here to allow that for a church to have an assembly inside of a RV park, mobile home park, where we do have the allowance for fraternal orders to do that, fraternal organizations, lodges, and things of that nature. And then the last one is rec. The rec district currently does not allow for a house of worship, but there are summer retreats and other facilities that are allowed. And there are places in our county even right now that I think probably would be a great example of a church that owns property that uses it year round as a summer camp retreat. They have an assembly hall there. And I mean, it's owned and run as a house of worship, but it offers all these other items as well. And so I would love for you guys to consider, and I'm not sure how the appropriate discussion will transpire now, but I would love for you guys to consider looking at those 6 or 7 different zonings that currently allow for other like assemblies that do not allow for churches to have the same right, and see if maybe that's something you guys would be willing and interested in changing. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker? Anyone? Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay. This time we will close the public portion of the meeting and bring the discussion back to the board.
Chair, I just got one thing that kind of, I don't know when that 5-unit PD 160-acre thing came in, but I think that if you don't want to encourage a PUD, planned unit development, or conditional use that exceeds the density of the underlying land use district. I mean, I think that the intent of a PUD is to cluster things and to allow them to have relief so that they can build around wetlands or constraints like that, but not to exceed the density or intensity of the underlying land use district.
I agree with you, Mr. Dixon. I think the thing is what we're here to talk about today is not a revision of that as much as just trying to clarify it for now and then go back later if that's a discussion we want to have further about changing that comp plan amendment and changing what we have. I think that today what we were tasked with is just cleaning up the language so that there wouldn't be any misrepresentations. But am I speaking out of turn, Joanna?
No, I totally agree. It would have to be a comp plan amendment as well. But there's a lot of good points here. So it sounds like I will be bringing forward another ordinance amendment in the future, but also a comp plan amendment. We're going to have to look at that because that's actually in the comp plan and in the LDC. Agreed. Heard that from at least one speaker as well. So that will come back before you at a later date.
Is that what you're talking about, like the PUDs and allowing higher densities over what's already allowed in the CL?
It's been in the comp plan for so long, but point taken. It's Mr. Dixon's right. Nobody wants to do 1 to 5 acres in a CL. That's crazy to me, but it's there.
What do you mean that's crazy to me?
I think that kind of density in the coastal area is not what the Nature Coast is.
Correct.
And agreed. So, but it's in the comp plan. And it's in the LDC carried forward.
But
not
nobody's done it. Nobody's done it
I
really.
can't recall anybody that's been able to do
And you're
that.
saying that because you said 160 acre minimum, trying to find a parcel that size, but you could
And-
cobble some together.
And regional water and sewer.
Right.
That's tough.
And then also just with experience in the building industry, knowing the constraints and restrictions to try and build multiple residences in an area like that, it's very expensive.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult to.
So we should just take it out.
That was,
Right.
you beat me to it.
She's saying that.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
right.
saying.
I know. I was just
I'm
expounding
saying
on
it'll
what
be a
she.
future amendment. It will have to also be a comp plan amendment, which takes a little longer than LDC,
Yeah.
but agreed. And Dr. Wilburn just jumping in had a lot of good points too of looking at some of those land use districts. We can do that future.
What are the legalities of saying in CL, just, you're not going to build anything anywhere anyhow?
Well, you probably want to keep it at 1 unit per 20 acres like it is, but you can't change the LDC now.
No, I'm not saying today.
I think it would be very difficult to have a regulation that you can't do anything with your property, but 1 to 20 acres seems to further the policy considerations of protecting the nature coast.
So as long as we make it very, very difficult to develop, one home and
You're
50
giving-
acres.
You're giving them relief to work with the environment if you have the ability to cluster, and to build around things, but you still have the overlying comp plan designation of 1 unit per 20 acres. I mean, I think the RV scenario is a little more tricky or a little more difficult because they are transient. They're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be impacting the environment like a residential neighborhood would. But that's it's a little more difficult to deal with that issue than it is. I think in general, though, you don't want to exceed your comprehensive plan land use density by encouraging somebody to get a PD. It's kind of contradictory, and it's not good.
I think
best
we all
practice.
kind of agree.
Yeah.
And we'll look at it later, right, Joanna? I personally just want to say that I'm not sure we have the right language on this change for the waterfront setbacks with the pools. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't know if it needs to be workshopped a little longer or something. I know this isn't a workshop today, but I don't like where we're at with that, and I don't know how others feel.
I would say that I didn't like where we were at the last time we changed it. Mr. Zerwinski brings up a very valid point, and I've been talking about it since the day I came on this commission, is people just clear cut everything. And now here we are, and he gives us a story that the DEP doesn't even do anything about it. Is that because they're expecting it to fall in the county? The county has no mechanism to enforce. There's no clear answer. There really isn't. Like, you leave the 15-foot buffer. I can only think of one waterfront community in the entire Nature Coast that I know of, with the exception of some of like Ozello, where there's actually a true buffer, that Riverwalk area in Homosassa on the blue waters right there. But everywhere else, they just completely clear, and then you people build, and you build the stormwater retention area, and then people come in and they pave all the way to the seawall with pavers, and it's just it's a mess. I don't know how to fix it, but I would just say that I agree with you that I don't like the language.
So is it
May-
don't? I'm sorry, go ahead.
May I ask, is it that you don't like the language or you don't like the concept? Because if you don't like the concept, that's much easier to fix. If what you're saying is you don't want to allow swimming pools within the 35-foot setback.
But we've already said that we were going to allow concrete slabs and decks. So how do we say the pool is different? I didn't like it then, just so you know, but it was shoved through and passed.
You can still not like it.
Right. I still don't like it.
So should we work on changing the language, or are you all just going to say we don't like it and we're going to continue to not like it?
Well, I think that was a much larger discussion about, and there were a lot of people who came and spoke to us about there being a net benefit of having Mr. Szwinski talked about it today, not having the grass clippings and those things going in. So I think his point was valid, that I don't think we need to redo the whole thing, but rather, there are 2 points of view. Like he said, if you have the vegetative buffer versus a seawall, if we have a seawall, it's fine. So I don't know if there's a way that we can put it into words.
You want to redraft it to make a distinction between those two scenarios. If there's a seawall, it's X. If there's a natural buffer, then X. But what Joanna's saying is, by making that distinction, you're just inviting people to
Correct.
build a seawall.
Yeah.
And they have to because their yard's underwater.
I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you.
I think one of the problems is we need to work on enforcement.
Right. Code enforcement.
That's the thing that we've been talking about forever with how do we keep the stormwater retention on these lots that Mr. Zerwinski says is a net benefit, and we all agree, but then people fill them in and then they just grass it. How do we, the mechanism to enforce what's supposed to happen is not there, and we just that's why we keep trying to throw new rules on top of it, but really at the end of the day, they go and they do whatever they want to do, and we don't have any way of making them not do it.
Well, unfortunately, once they do it, it's too late, except for remediation or mitigation, and we can't be everywhere all the time. It just so we used to have an environmental type planner and a compliance person, but we don't have that position anymore. Maybe it's something like we can talk to administration about getting another position back.
What about, and I'm just throwing this out there after watching all these variances and everything, instead of encouraging them to put the whole thing 15, or was it 35 feet from the water?
35 feet with a berm and swale.
Why not just say if they just need a certain percentage, then they can get an administrative variance, so to allow for that placement of that pool in the pool cage, so that it's not, you're not encouraging them to put the whole thing out there, but if you have a corner that has to stick out there,
We already have the average of the 6 closest lots, but no closer on either side, and that's working for most sites. But this is an automatic 15-foot period that they're already getting for slabs, and should they get it for pools. And we can take out the proposed red language there, or in-ground pools without closures, and we reworded it a little bit earlier if you don't think that's appropriate. This again was something that the commission said they wanted to further discuss. They didn't go one way or the other.
Well, this commission, it wasn't even this commission. We have a new
True.
commission now from when this was.
So we're up, and
at some point we're going to have to address sea level rise. We're going to have to do that. Maybe that's the environmental planner's job, but that's a reality that we're going to have to deal with in Citrus County, because we have so many odd-shaped lots, and they're on the water, and the water's coming up. But in the interim, why not just have, if it's a de minimis impact, where you have a certain percentage that has to stick out into the setback, that they just get an administrative variance for that, but you have to figure out what that cutoff.
I'm actually right now we're just making them do the average and no closer, and that's really helping. I don't know about giving them even more, but if y'all are not consensus of liking the 15-foot exemption for pools, we can go forward with that recommendation, whatever you want. Period, regardless of language, just taking out that red.
It's not that I don't like the pools that don't have an enclosure. It's just that, I want to make sure that we're not encouraging bad behavior with the law, and then also at the same time not creating a circumstance where people are ripping out vegetative buffers. You know what I mean? So I don't know how to do it though.
Right, and that's what's happening with the language that's strike through up there for the lots with seawalls language, which, Mr. Twinski had a good point. I do want them to have the natural buffer, but what they're doing is putting in seawalls so they can use the 15-foot.
If there's a seawall on either side, they're gonna put a seawall. I just can't see someone leaving the natural if there's seawalls on either side.
Because they're the one that gets flooded.
So you're only encouraging those that wouldn't necessarily, really maybe the lakes and the rivers more so than anything on the west. I would think on the west side, I don't see people leaving natural vegetative buffers. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time out there, but on the lakes and the rivers, I think people are more inclined to leave the buffer, the natural buffer. So maybe this would cause some of those folks to do it.
So should we rewrite the language to try to tighten it up to avoid those situations? As was stated, if you've got the seawall on the right and seawall on the left, then yes, it makes sense. If there isn't, then we should maybe beef it up, indicating that you cannot clear anything.
Well, you already can't.
Yeah, the
You
language is
already
there.
can't.
You can't, cannot. They're just doing it. Go ahead.
So in the earlier meetings that I spoke of, this was the suggestion, what the strike through is what I came up with to resolve that issue. Because it's better than not having that language in there, whether it encourages people to build seawalls or not. It really shouldn't. There should be a process that a seawall permit or a riprap permit or a clearing of a lot goes through somewhere, the county. And this is the lesser of two evils, is that language that was struck through. I put that in there as a suggestion for the concept that I was speaking of. So I think it's the lesser of two evils to take that strike through and put it back in there for lots with seawalls or with existing seawalls and riprap and lacking a natural vegetative buffer that you're allowed to go 15. And what that does is it covers those Crystal River Canal lots that are all grassed with seawalls. It covers all those circumstances where you may have that, you're going to definitely have those average 6 getting you up to that 15 because they're all built before the code and they're all up in, right on the seawalls. I would prefer, and I think it's better protection for us to take that strike through and leave that in there, the seawalls or ripraps. It's the lesser of two evils. It helps protect. And if we're finding that it's encouraging people to build seawalls in areas where they're not appropriate, we'll just have to, at this point, rely on DEP. Because if there's not a seawall on either side, they've got to go through what's known as an individual permit, not an exemption or a general permit. That's a higher standard. Understand that? Any questions?
No. Do you have any questions?
David?
No.
I think it's the lesser two evils. It tries to protect those natural buffers as best we can. If we take it out, it's a blanket 15 foot, and those buffers will be gone in areas where we do have natural buffers.
I can just tell you, unfortunately, we're seeing permit applicants say, oh, if I just put in a seawall, then I can go 15 feet.
Right.
Unfortunately.
They just cut it out.
And in that case, they would have gone through, sorry. In that case, they would have gone through DEP under an individual permit unless they've used the exemption. And the exemption situation is 150 foot with a seawall, existing seawall on either side. And I think you guys all know the rationale. You've talked about it. That's the lot that's going to receive the flooding. They're going to do the seawall anyways. There's really no reason on that to protect the natural buffer. That's one that's just lost because the existing seawalls are there. That's lost to the environment. Well, let's protect the areas where we do have natural buffers of 3,000 feet on or more on lots that are adjacent to the river. We've all seen them. We've all been on those rivers like the Rainbow River and others, Wekiva, those areas that are protected where we don't have seawalls and we don't have erosion because the folks understand they need to leave that natural buffer to protect against erosion, sedimentation, turbidity, and we have a pristine type environment.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
Do you know what kind of, back up there. Do you know what kind of criteria DEP uses in determining whether they're going to issue an individual permit? Is there I mean, if the county wanted to get into the business of permitting seawalls, what kind of criteria would they use to determine whether somebody could get it or not?
In those circumstances where they're not the exemption, they look at a whole lot of things. They look at wave deflection, erosion. Typically, that's what they're supposed to.
So things we would need a staff that had that kind of expertise.
No, I would say that,
Like, would our engineering folks be able to do that, or would it be somebody in the planning world? I'm just curious.
I haven't thought that through, but anything that doesn't meet the exemption goes to a higher standard at DEP of review, and they have to look at all the environmental conditions. To have the county at least do a cursory review when these come through, perhaps not an engineering, but a kind of appropriateness for the area type review.
We gotta have objective criteria. So think about that before this goes before the BOCC. Maybe you can give them some ideas.
And this can still, the strike through can still be good without that. I think we need to take that and keep that in, that strike through in there, not as a strike through, as the language that was originally proposed. And then we can move on from there and say, okay, are we seeing that we're getting more and more applications for seawalls where they're not appropriate? And in that case, we move on to saying, hey, I think we need to do something about it if DEP's not doing their job. But I fought hard for this strike through because I was asked during the staff meetings, what's the criteria you would come up with? And I put this language in there for lots with seawalls or riprap and lacking a natural buffer that are on natural grade. Slabs or decks, 15 foot. If you have that buffer, you got to stick with the 35. To me, it's straightforward. Thank you.
Okay, board. Let's, anybody have any other comments? What are we gonna?
One quick.
Yes, sir.
Question. Joanna, early in your presentation, you touched on the change in language for the eaves and the distance between the homes. Can you clarify that? What was, what is?
Right, so you can see what was is the strike through. It's not, this board debated this so much for eaves and came up with what's in D there, the underlined stuff. And then a subsequent amendment for this, a different section, not A, B, not C and D, actually removed this. It was an error. We're trying to put back in the language that actually this board approved previously. So we previously it said you can only do an eave in the front yard for 3 feet. The board debated a lot and said, no, you can probably do it in the front and rear too when you have an awning, up to 3 feet in the side. So that it was debated quite a bit, and that's just putting in the existing language that, or the language that y'all approved, but then was taken out in error in a follow-up amendment.
So it's basically in a high density environment, basically 6 feet wall to wall.
Not necessarily high density. This would allow, if you have a house, the eave can extend up to 3 feet into the side. And right now it can't the way it's worded.
Well, I think what he's saying is smaller lots.
Yes.
He's saying higher density, but like the 40-foot lot,
Right.
40-foot wide
Right, and
subdivisions.
there was an input from a citizen that said, well, what about multifamily? So it was allowed in, the eaves are multifamily too. But the same thing, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can summarize just a little bit, try to get things back on track a little bit. It sounds like for the removal of the, I think you're okay with the interpretation change to try to clarify who does that. Of course, interpretations have to have, when you do an interpretation, you need full stuff. So the county engineer cannot approve it, just like I can't, without actually really going into it and getting some documentation for interpretation. I think we talked about that one. The waterfront setbacks, we've kind of been a little stuck on. Mrs. Zawinski thinks that the strike-through should stay. And pools and enclosures, I'm not sure how you guys are leaning on those.
I'm siding with the scientist because it sounds like there's no right answer here. We really don't know. We're just trying to, and we've been trying to do something along these lines since I've been here. So if we have an expert that says leave it, I think that we should leave it, and then we adjust and move along accordingly. And then I still stay firm with the enclosure part of it.
So the in-ground pools is okay without enclosures as worded?
Correct.
In your opinion. Now, do I have a consensus for that?
I'll support that.
2, 3, 4. Okay, I got enough nods. That's great. And then I think I have enough nods for putting back in the strike through in the beginning of this, as per Mr. Zawinski at this time. Okay. Land use tables with the headings, we would put back in the headings and say as outlined below next to each one to try to clarify a little bit more. That was a consensus too. Can I have nods? I'm
Yes.
sorry. All right, accessory structure, I think we were okay with that. Event venues in the areas. All of them were PUDs with the exception of rural residential, because that is, as pointed out, something that agricultural uses are more interested in for their farming. What do you think about event venues?
I just want, you might want to make that because it could be, event venue could be a wedding, or it could be like a mud.
Mudding, no, yeah, I
Like
really
an
think I'd put
outdoor-
those in arenas, but they're all PUDs with the exception of RUR. If you think RUR should also be a PUD, it'll have to come before you on a case-by-case basis and see.
I think
Conditional.
that it should
Okay.
come before us. That's a rural residential area, like that, it's a commercial event venue, whatever you want to, however dense or not dense it is, it's still commercial in a rural residential. I believe that it needs to be looked at by a board that says, yes, we believe that this should sit in that
Does it have to
particular
be
area.
a PUD or could it be conditional use?
In the lodging part too, so I mean, if it's consistent with what we have, what we're proposing for EDGR, they are very similar, so RUR with PUD for lodging as well, is what you're kind of getting at.
I mean, I think a PUD is, when you get a PUD, like you say, this is what you're doing, and you're not allowed to deviate. Like
Okay.
we have an example of an event venue that came in front of us, and the dude did whatever he wanted underneath the sky, and then they had to clean it all up. Well, if you get a PUD and this is basically your roadmap that says this is what you're doing, if you deviate from this one bit, then you have to come back in front of us.
Well, that didn't have lodging. And also, there was a little bit of backstory behind it.
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying he
On
should
both
have had a
sides.
PUD.
On both sides.
Had he had a PUD.
Right.
And I don't think there was much discussion on the car wash, mini warehouse, a little more scrutiny on those to go to a PUD level. Allowing them in light industrial and pulling them out of PSI. I don't think there was any concern on that. You're seeing a lot of those and they are more detailed than expected. I didn't get any comments on the type of access. I think that was kind of clear. It's a little unusual to have a 75 unit subdivision outside of a PUD, but they need to come off of collector roads rather than local. And finally, on the future land use element in the CL area, the direction I'm getting is to come back before you with a strike through of this, both in the comp plan and the Atlas Amendment, and the LDC.
What
Correct.
about Dr. Wilburn's?
Yes, he has a lot of stuff with looking at church uses, and that would also be part of that as an upcoming amendment. We would try to put those on. I think his points were well taken. I heard some also from, I've written so many notes down, I can't even read my thing right anymore. Members of the public talking about a few of the uses in ag as well. We probably need to look at some of those. Don't want to allow too much in the ag area that we don't already. So take a look at the existing tables for ag. That work?
Works for me.
Let's move it forward.
I do need a motion.
Yep.
Yeah.
What? So this is an OA. Make sure I'm doing this right.
For a motion.
So do we
Commissioner
have the?
Bass, got it?
Oh, okay. I'm
So,
sorry.
Mr.
Whoever.
The Planning and Development Commission finds application number OA-23-01 consistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and Citrus County Land Development Code, and that the board recommends approval of the application to the Board of County Commissioners based upon the evidence and testimony presented in the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition, including any and all changes discussed.
Thank you, Commissioner Bass. We have a motion.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Bramlett. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I think I forgot.
All right, your next meeting on May 18th will be the Glamp Ground again. They have changed their application, so you will see that again on May 18th. It is the only item on the agenda, so it won't hopefully be an all-day thing. On June 1st, we're canceling the meeting on June 1st. You get a vacation day. It's just the way things timed out, so yay. So we'd see you again on June 15th. We have 2 or 3 on every meeting after that. So June 1st is a unique one. We'll enjoy it. The Sweetwater Homes that was here for full hours and hours is coming up for the County Commission on May 11th. That's a Thursday meeting for whatever reason. And that is all I have.
This is all just one.
Is there any other discussion, board?
Yes, your entire packet is the Glamp Round. There will be also public input constantly, and we'll get that to you.
Oh, I have a question. The number 1 item on the agenda, should we just keep that paperwork, or are you gonna?
They're working on changing it,
Changes,
so yeah, I
okay.
would get rid of it. It's gonna change.
Any other discussion? Okay. Seeing none, motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.